I'd still vote for them.
If you want the world to get better, you do the work between the elections, and during the election, you make the best choice, and then you get your ass back to work. You, like me, spend a lot of our time whining online. That's our jobs. But the difference between you and me is that I don't think I'm special for my abstemiousness from the process that other people have lived and died and bled for, trying to build a world comfortable enough that we could be dipshits in a computer chair. I try to keep my nose out of drama unless I'm directly implicated in it. And I keep hearing people sort of like foretelling, you know, like the church bell tolls. What's happening here? What's going on?
So I've done a lot of introspection over the last couple of days because I've been accused of having a real bad case of the VDS.
What did I do?
think, well, here's the thing.
That's
Here's the thing. I think what I actually have is VFDS. I've got Vaush fan base derangement syndrome, which I think is
I've got that too.
That's a whole different ball of wax. You know what I mean? Because, you know, you and I haven't talked in like 2 years or something. And every show I do, there are still people reminding me that you handed me my ass 2 years ago, Vaush. You grabbed my ass, put it on a silver platter, flipped it around and handed it right to me. 2 years later.
Look, the people in my audience really like Biden. Okay, they're fanboy. It's not even for me. Okay, they're just running around proselytizing.
Didn't even give you a reach around, Paul. Up, man. How it goes though. It's how it goes.
I think it boils down to the same old song and dance. Honestly, to set aside the jokes, I think it's the vote blue no matter who thing. I think it's the kind of making apologies for Biden thing. I think it's that kind of angle, I think, is probably our sharpest disagreement.
Well, the real base position is not making apologies for his bad behavior, but then arguing you have to vote for him anyway, right? That's the real like electoralism pilled, there is no way out, this is what we live with attitude to take towards the situation.
Yeah, I don't like that either. I don't like the idea of us just eternally settling for a shitty neoconservative and neoliberal clothing. I don't like that. I don't think that gets us anywhere nice. I think it might stave off some of the worst shit for a couple more years, but I think we end up in the same toilet. No.
I stand by the logic. Fundamentally, nothing has really changed. If there are only two possible options, you have to go with the better of the two. Obviously, like, rhetorically speaking, I'm not exactly thrilled to be doing anything that even sounds like defending Biden right now because of what he's doing with regards to the genocide in Palestine. Right. So this isn't exactly like a period of time during which I'm going to go out there and proselytize and wave banners around and, you know, shoot T-shirt cannons with Biden's face on it into the crowd. Not the time for that. More probably going to focus on tearing down the GOP, you know, but ultimately, like, isn't it time now? Isn't it time now more than ever to do that, though? I mean, Biden's numbers are tanking, right? Yeah, he's pulled up even, and is a lot of polls is losing to Trump. He's losing horribly to generic Democrat, which is like one of the saddest things I've ever seen in my lifetime. The polling's not good. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people think it is, because everyone who is going to vote for Trump thinks positively of him. At least most do. Whereas there are lots of people who don't very much like Biden but still vote.
This is an unusual election for the reason that both of these guys are a known quantity, right?
And both rather unpopular.
Had a helping of both of these dudes as president. So this is an unusual election because we've not been in a situation where we have a choice between America has, but like in my lifetime, never had a situation where it's like, hey, do you want this guy who was president or this guy who was just president? It's like, which one do you want a second helping of? And the fact that so many Americans are just like, hey, I'll take a second helping of Trump, please, seems pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no getting over just the sheer lack of intelligence of your average voter. I mean, that's definitely sort of an ongoing problem we have to deal with. I mean, in materially speaking, like, obviously Biden's presidency has been a lot better than Trump's. The big stickler in that has been this business with the genocide of the Palestinian people that he aids and abets, which, I mean, there's no defending that. Obviously, Trump would have done the same thing. Trump has been even more loud in the...
There's been more sticklers, right, than just Palestine.
Well, that's definitely the main one. But apart from that, his presidency's definitely been better than I expected it to be. Certainly not perfect, but, you know, from what you get with neoliberal candidates, he's definitely exceeded in some critical areas, mostly with regards to union stuff. I mean, he was doing so well with that, and then we have this.
Yeah, I mean, I did get excited with his NLRB, you know, kind of protecting unions in a way that we haven't had since the 80s. You know, preventing companies from union busting before the union is even ratified. I think that that's a huge deal. I gave him props for that for sure. But outside of that, I find very little to crow about when it comes to the Biden presidency. You want to list off some of the wonderful things Biden has done?
I mean, he's done a good number of good things, mostly because there are good things that are just sensible governance, but it's really just a matter of whether or not he's done better than Trump, which I think is pretty easy to make the case for.
It's a low bar as well.
I'm sorry?
It's a low bar as well.
Yeah, it could be all the way down in hell. The math doesn't change. But yeah, I mean, he's a competent politician, right? In the sense that he actually cares about governing in a way that Trump and the Republicans don't. So a lot of the stuff that he does that's good is going to be like very baseline stuff, like, you know, not like keeping the country funded and not gutting the administrative state, like really, really basic stuff like that. But the bar keeps going lower. I mean, with Project 2025, the Republicans just openly admitting they plan on like gutting the democracy from the administrative state once they get the chance to, in the face of stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's not new though. I mean, they've been talking about that since I was a boy.
That's like their 900-page manifesto of like, hey, everything you know.
Yeah, that's the don't show up to the administrative state tomorrow. You've been cool. Don't show up. Manifesto that they wrote. Yeah, I mean they've always threatened to do stuff like this, bitched about the administrative state. Seems like they've been a lot more aggressive about it lately, but no sense in giving them the opportunity to prove to us whether or not they mean it this time.
I did have kind of a hypothetical question I wanted to ask you. I don't know, maybe it's a little bit out there, but maybe it's not too crazy because we've seen some polls where RFK Jr. is polling at like 22% in one poll. Most polls it's like 10, 12%. So obviously you could be at that, you know, you could be at 20% and still not get a single electoral college vote.
Right.
But I wondered if there was a point where his candidacy became like he had an actual path. Would you then have to look at this three-way race and pick the lesser of three evils, or are you still just automatically for Biden?
Well, I mean, if RFK Jr. was better than Biden, he's not. I mean, he's terrible.
I think it's arguable because I mean, I think RFK Jr. is a crazy lunatic, anti-vaxxer, just as pro-Israel as the rest of them. So he's got a lot of, you know, severe issues. But there's also some stuff that I mean, he's like pretty based on. So I don't know. I'd have to kind of weigh it out.
Well, like what? What is he better on than Biden?
Let me just pull up his page, I guess.
Like he says stuff like that, but a lot of the stuff that he said, like at rallies or when talking to people publicly, has wildly differed from his.
That's every
his vaccine policy is gonna
Right.
be about the same as Trump's or worse.
You could say the same about Biden too. I mean, Biden ran on a $15 minimum wage. Biden ran on a bunch of, you know, ending the border crisis. Those
I
were
think there's
big talking points of
pretty
his.
critical difference where like there's lots of like every politician will say they'll do things.
Let's just RFK Jr. is not really important. Let's just take him out of it. Let's just say there's a third party person that rises to the level where they could win. Would it then be lesser of three evils?
Yeah, if they had a shot at winning, I suppose. I mean, the problem is because we don't have ranked choice voting, so it's insanely risky, even if there was a really, really good shot of trying to push a third-party candidate, because obviously if the third-party candidate's good enough to me that I would consider voting for them, they'd have to be left-leaning, which means they'd siphon more votes from the Dems. I feel like in this system, it's almost impossible to get an outcome like that. But I guess hypothetically, if the math worked out, that would probably be preferable to just like touting the two-party thing.
Don't you feel like there's like a certain risk in creating a standard for Democrats no higher than just like be better than the opposition? Like long term, don't you think that produces worse and worse candidates and hurts the party in the long run?
Well, I think the problem is that it really hasn't produced worse and worse candidates. We've been a two-party system for centuries, effectively, with very minor exceptions. And the trends that have dictated like better or worse governorship don't seem to be like, it doesn't seem to be just like a downward plummet. I don't actually think that like I don't think the politicians are that motivated by the prospect of winning. Like, non-participation doesn't seem to motivate Democrats in the ways that we want it to. If left-leaning people indicate that we're not reliable voters, they'll just move to the right to pick up more moderate voters, which is historically what they've done. When they feel like they don't have any chance of capturing the more active populist left-wing crowd, they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll never please those guys. When, to be fair, we are pretty unpleasable. So we're going to try and like pull over the centrist voters, the moderate voters. So you get like Clinton, for example, right? Where after Reagan and Bush Sr., they're like, okay, well, you know, the anti-war advocacy movement has basically died down. The boomers are all in like middle management corporate jobs. There isn't an active, engaged left to appeal to. The Cold War is like ending, so there's not even that. So like, who do we appeal to win? And Clinton was like, oh, well, we'll just do Reagan's economic policies, but you know, we'll smile about it and we'll be like slightly less homophobic and racist. And that works.
We know there's a ton of like very like there are things where the American people are not lockstep with the American left, but like there's a lot of very populist leftist economic policies that poll well that Bernie Sanders was taking advantage of during his campaigns to tremendous effect. So I think there is ways to bring people in, but it seems to involve, you know, doing more actual stuff for people instead of just being like, hey, here's a little few tokenistic gestures, competent governance, but no real change,
TJ,
except for very incrementally.
In the state you and I have lived in for a long time, Louisiana, I mean, you don't live there anymore. I mean, we normally have basically an open sort of parties thing. So like basically, if you don't get 50%, then we go from a primary, then we go to an actual election. I was actually avoided this year because Jeff Landry, a horrible conservative, won the state easily. He got over 50% of the vote and wasn't even competitive. Because if you actually looked at the voter turnout and in the race, it was 29%. So I mean, the Democratic Party in this state is a joke. They're not even really trying to run anyone credibly. When this is a state they probably actually could be competitive in, and there's a lot of states like that, but they're not competitive. There's like that's a red state, that's a blue state, and it's like almost like neither party even gives a shit or tries.
With that Louisiana governor you're talking about,
well, the soon-to-be governor.
Well, yeah, the governor-elect. He wants to withhold funds for New Orleans water infrastructure.
He does.
Until women who seek abortions are prosecuted.
Yep.
So basically holding the infrastructure of a city hostage.
Oh, it's far right.
His far right social agenda is enacted against.
I watched his victory speech,
abortions.
And the first thing that's mentioned is God. It's like, we're doing this for God, and family and some other stuff comes later. So yeah, that's going to be the agenda. And New Orleans obviously is a horribly placed city. If you don't know, it's between Lake Pontchartrain and the Mississippi River, and it's basically a giant bowl. So if those and the sewage and water problems, I mean, they have pumps, they have to pump water out of the city constantly. So withholding that infrastructure is going to make sure more people suffer and more people don't get adequate access to sanitation they need.
What if Biden dies? Who becomes the Democratic nominee? Maybe Vaush would know this. Would that just fall instantly to Kamala Harris, or?
Yeah, I guess would have to. I mean, I assume they've been talking about that behind the scenes because it's. I mean,
it has to be a subject of discussion with his age.
Oh yeah, I'm sure they, you know, and there's a bunch of people crossing their fingers that he can make it across the finish line again. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's pretty bad there. Kamala Harris will have an even worse chance against Donald Trump than Biden by a pretty wide margin. And considering how bad things have been for Biden.
Paul was saying that he thinks that there's not going to be any debates this debate season. He thinks that neither one of these guys is going to want to do a debate, and so they're both going to just find ways out of it. I don't know if Paul's still there. If you wanted to,
I'm here. I mean, I don't know for absolutely certain that that's what's going to go down, but I have a feeling that specifically Trump's kind of move, dodging debates and stuff, has set a precedent where it's like, I know for a fact that Joe Biden's handlers are shitting their britches about the idea of Joe Biden having to speak extemporaneously for a hour and a half. Like that's got to make people break out into cold sweats in the Biden camp. Same goes for Trump. I mean, both of these guys are demented as off the rails as and I don't know that it's going to do them any favors to engage in the kind of American tradition of debate. And so I wouldn't be shocked if there just aren't debates this year, you know?
I think there's a decent chance that, yeah. A lot of the, I think right now, I think the person who's shitting their pants more is probably Trump, in large part because he's declined very rapidly in the past year or so. I think a lot of it is just the court cases. Like, he has to keep jumping around between different courthouses in different states. Like, he's lost his business license. He's losing money. He's hemorrhaging money. The GOP was giving him money to pay for legal fees, but they've stopped doing that since. Like, the actual coffers of the GOP were open to him for a time, but now that's closed. He has people flipping on him. Like, Rudy Giuliani couldn't even afford a bus ticket home, and he's like potentially someone who could flip on Trump. Like, he's under an amount of stress that I legitimately think would probably break most people. And the fact that he at his age is even still doing any of this is, if nothing else, indicative of like demonic constitution. But I think it is starting to take its toll. I don't even know if he's going to make it all the way. My money would be more on Trump dying than Biden, because Biden, if nothing else, you know, the presidency is a stressful job, but is it more stressful than what Trump is doing right now? I actually don't know.
What percentage of Americans would think that Trump had been assassinated if he were to die of a heart attack or something like
I don't know
that?
the exact number of people who are going to vote for him, probably like literally 100% of prospective Trump voters would be like, yep, that was the CIA, 100%. And then we would have like Marjorie Taylor Greene pretending to be anti-CIA for a bit, the way she was anti-FBI to cover for Trump. So yeah, I guess that'll be fun. There's not really any easy way through this, right? Like, even the best possible outcome still involves half the country adopting new radical conspiracy theories to explain their loss.
Yeah, but you know, I am one of the few reasons that I would say that one of the few things I would think of is like, hey, this is an interesting reason to vote for Biden, which I have, you know, not even come close to deciding I want to do. But I was thinking about the fact that maybe if the Democrats win enough elections, the far right wingers would be like, it's so rigged, there's no point in even doing it. You know, just totally disenfranchise the right wing. Just like, oh shit,
I think we've actually
all
kind of been
rigged
seeing
against us.
that.
No point in doing it, boys. Let's just stay home and then drink beer.
I think we've been seeing that a little bit, because we've had the elections in 2022 and the ones we just had a week ago. In both
Democrats
cases,
do seem to be beating polling.
Yeah, consistently. So Republicans are answering their phones and saying, yeah, you know, we want this, we want Republicans, yeah, blah, blah. But then when it comes to actually going out there, the whole 2020 election fiasco was basically the entire GOP screaming, our elections are rigged, nothing you do matters. And I think as a consequence of that, there are a lot of like boomer, you know, like geriatric Republicans sitting at their couch thinking like, well, what does it matter anyway? This country's going to hell in a handbasket. You know, I hope the rapture comes soon. And they're actually themselves over a little bit, which is really funny. And one of the reasons why I'm so consistent with the Biden thing, because it really shows what faltering in electoral consistency can do for an entire party when people feel hopeless.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a huge swath of America that is, and I kind of have always felt like those people, the people in the middle that don't vote, get maligned as lazy or non-participatory. I think there's just a lot of people that don't see a point anymore. And I'm sorry to say that from an economic standpoint, especially, which is really what people vote on, you know, social issues are great and they can motivate voters. But I think that ultimately people vote their wallets, and Joe Biden has been horrible for American wallets. You know what I mean? He's been horrible economically speaking.
Now, the economy has been bad, to be sure. I don't think he's done much exceptional in either direction when it comes to economic management. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act worked, so that was good. And you know, he significantly reduced child poverty for that time with the infrastructure bill. There have been like big steps he's taken forward. It seems like a big part of the problem is that there's not really that much infrastructure for a president to do much positive with the economy without some kind of like transformative action that I don't expect from Biden because he's just a liberal, right? But like conceptually, I think you would have to reach really far out there with like some kind of insane like price control deal or like direct negotiation with corporations or like something like that, you know?
Did you see that they've trotted Obama out there now to pimp the UBI to people?
He spoke in favor of UBI? No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, Obama, they've been quietly kind of trotting Obama out at these little events and stuff, talking up UBI.
Fucking hate
automation is bad. You need a UBI.
He's basically doing the exact pitch that Andrew Yang was doing a few years ago before he decided he was going to do his stupid forward party
into irrelevancy, then tank in the mayoral election in New York City.
I mean, if you're going to start a third party, like it should probably have, I don't know,
backing,
like and
supporters,
like, ideas, and like things you actually take positions
you
on.
See how Cornel West like announced his candidacy, went with the People's Party, which is like the Jimmy Dore grift wagon, then hopped from that to the Green Party, and then hopped from that over to being an independent in like no time at all. Really serious stuff here on the third party.
Yeah, I don't know why he's popped around so much. I saw Jill Stein's announcement video. I wasn't super impressed with that. I just put out a video about that.
So this argument of mine gets painted as emotional, and I'll admit there is definitely an emotional component to it. We'll talk about it. But what do you say to the argument that I find it utterly unconscionable to vote for Joe Biden, given what he is? A total vampire, liberal, crony capitalist, destroyer of the environment, exploiter of the third world, fascist when it comes to his border policy, completely and utterly feckless when it comes to his foreign policy, just absolutely and utterly unconscionable, racist, author of the crime bill that put a generation of black men behind bars. I mean, the list goes on, right? I could continue. I mean, and this is you know, what I'm being asked as a leftist to mobilize for. And really what I feel like is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like people with your position are arguing against, like, let's give up. Let's cede the argument that we're ever going to have something to vote for again, and let's just vote against. And that's not a great motivator for me. I have, as much as I'm painted as a doomer, I have high hopes for the future of humanity. And I think that humanity could do so much better, and that people could be so much better off. And when I'm served up two options, in which there's no chance for that happening, I feel completely and utterly disenfranchised, and I really find it hard to see the point. And morally, I find it hard to reconcile going and doing it.
I mean, I think that, like, at the end of the day, wanting good things is fine and all, but aspirations have to be tempered by an understanding of how to get there. It's like being a doctor at a triage and only having a limited supplies, and you can only heal 10 people for every 100, and throwing your hands up because, you know, you're engaging in a system where you don't get enough medicine to heal all 100 people. I feel like impulses like this, though well motivated, are ultimately designed to shut us out of power. If not by you, then like broadly in the ways they're enforced and sort of suggested and incentivized. Because by the standards you've set, we would never vote for any president, really. Maybe, like, I don't know, maybe Carter first. Like, there are some presidents maybe who wouldn't fit the specific set of parameters that you've said are unacceptable to you, and that's fine. But they're all bad. Power is bad. And as long as we shut ourselves out to the means to influence it, you know, we hamper our ability to make real change down the line. It seems like nothing is changing, but that's not true. Like, it feels that way sometimes because we pay attention to politics, so we're on the treadmill. But, like, little decisions day by day do genuinely add up. Like with Donald Trump, you know, we see how quickly things can backslide. One Republican presidency gave them 3 Supreme Court judges, and that just taints the Supreme Court for an entire generation. You know, trans people being banned from the military, DACA recipients being threatened to kick out of the country, Muslim ban. There's so many things that it's like, and those differences are meaningful. I feel like the big problem with liberals isn't that there aren't better than the Republicans, it's that they're not good enough at proving to others how much better their ideas are. Because if you just laid out, like, difference by difference, every plan or every idea they have on every single issue, right? Republicans want to just flat out not have trans or gay people in the country. Democrats vary from being accepting to openly, like, promoting their existence. When it comes
to...
What
do you think... I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I could have rambled forever. Please interrupt me.
With trans people, Do you not think, like, and I genuinely think this, with all of the bullshit that trans people and LGBTQ people in general get, and racial minorities and cultural minorities, lump them all, with the amount of shit that they get, I don't think that there's anybody. See, you talked about, and I assume you mean mostly social issues have progressed. So, legalizing gay marriage, anti-discrimination policies have flourished and proliferated in my lifetime. We've definitely made progress in that arena, but we've regressed economically. We are worse off economically than we were back in the old racist, homophobic days. And if that's not addressed, aren't you hurting the very self-same people that you're trying to advocate for?
But how does letting Trump win help that? It seems like the economic downturn has been a product of a bunch of really complicated factors. It doesn't seem like there's a correlation between...
It really isn't all that complicated. I mean, yes, it is. You could sit for days and write 1,000,000-page doctoral theses on what's happened in the last 40 years in the American economy. But really, honestly, it is something that you can put in layman's terms and be really 100% spot on about.
But it's not a dichotomy. There's no relationship between the advancement of social rights and the economic downturn. The economic downturn has been happening as a product of decades and decades of austerity and pro-corporate policies and a bunch of complicated globalization stuff that we can't fully control, but only somewhat control. And then on the other side of things, you have like the social benefits. We can get the social benefits. We just have to vote them. Like that does it. But as for the economic stuff, it's not like we're trading that away for a bad economy with Biden. The bad economy would have happened if Trump had won in 2020. It could potentially be worse.
The malaise and the sort of malevolence that exists in the Republican Party today is not just Trump, right? I mean, it's the entire party. That's been demonstrated by the Project 2025 thing, the fact that so many Republicans were willing to back Trump's little attempted coup, all that stuff. So eventually these people are going to get in power, right?
Well,
like the Republican Party, maybe it won't be this time, maybe it won't be next time.
I mean, historically speaking, Vaush, you have to
institute.
You have to admit
policies.
You see the
don't we want
back and forth, right? You have
I
to
just
admit.
feel like we need a stronger Democratic Party to go against. Like, I would think that defeating these people, less important election by election than it is to ultimately defeat them. And to ultimately defeat them, I feel like we need something stronger than the Democratic Party in its current incarnation. And I don't see how we're going to get that if the only standard we have for them is just be better than that. Like, I mean, if you can be 99% Hitler, I don't see how 99% Hitler saves the day.
At this point, like, we don't even know if we get another election after the Republicans put forward theirs. Like, they've made it pretty clear that they intend on dismantling the democratic system in a way that was not the case back in 2016 when Donald Trump won. A lot of people initially thought he would just be another bad president, and he was. But it's pretty clear at this point, like, the writing's on the wall. The Republicans just don't want the democracy. Like, they want to bypass it entirely. Well, not in any kind of euphemistic way. They will just flat out deconstruct. They're openly admitting to it at this point.
This is not new, though.
Well, this is. We've had Republican presidencies before. The specific willful intent to just eradicate the democratic institution.
Oh, you mean like when George W. Bush completely and utterly dismantled the right to privacy in this country?
So no. So I don't like the false equivalencies, okay? There are definitely anti-democratic trends that have persisted throughout the elections we've had in our lifetimes, before our lifetimes. This is different. If you can't see the difference, then you're muddying. You're obscuring detail. George W. Bush, the Patriot Act, what happened in Florida with the butterfly ballots, there are things to criticize, very, very bad things to criticize, but none of them are, and you're really lacking perspective if you disagree with this, the eradication of our democracy. The difference between America pre and post George Bush was significant, but it was not like us turning into Turkmenistan. Like, there is a incredible, like, threat, a weapon still on the table here. And at this point, considering the fact that they seem fully willing to use it, I mean, they're shouting from the rooftops they want to use it, it's not really a matter of strategy. We just can't let them win. Even if the Democratic Party remains weak, enfeebled, crippled, ineffective, hypocritical, inconsistent.
The problem is, knowing that that's their ambition, aren't we just pushing a time bomb a little further out?
If it further out is better than it now. further out, a lot
I
of
mean,
stuff could
but-
happen. The Republican Party could collapse in on itself. Right now, it's having
That's
It's having massive funding issues. It's getting clearer and clearer with the past two elections, the midterms in 2023, that Republicans are doing worse on social issues than they used to. Over time, the Republican Party might collapse.
Probably just
for funding
strengthening
issues.
their resolve to get rid of democracy, though, right?
Well, if they can have as
sure.
much resolve as they want. If they lose their elections, they can keep their resolve and take it back to the losers' field.
But they're not going to lose forever is the problem. I mean, we've seen that Americans,
you can't
whatever
talk-
goes on, Americans seem to go back and forth. I mean, right now, even after seeing that Trump does have these ambitions, a considerable amount of Americans are still considering voting for him.
You can't keep appealing to inevitability while also saying you hope for a better future. You can't. Those two things
Well, that's the thing is,
can't
like,
exist
I'm appealing-
simultaneously.
I'm
But
appealing to
what I'm saying is,
inevitability.
I think that if we're going to ensure that better future, we have to be more aggressive against them. And
I'm
it can't just
appealing
be
to-
like, it can't just be the tepid messaging of Joe Biden that's like, hey, Jack, I'm going to restore democracy, and I'm basically the most milquetoast politician you could conceive of, and I'm not aggressive against these policies, and I'm doing so unimpressively that America actually
almost
wants
saying,
to start
like-
helping of Donald Trump.
I think I get what you're saying. You're saying like, if we're talking about elections, what if they just say, well, having an election even before they get into power? I think that's what you're saying. Like, so if it's inevitable that they're trying to push the country towards like a fascistic state or something, or totalitarian state or whatever, that if it's too weak to manage to stop it at the polls, I mean, like maybe you can have that. Maybe you have a weak Democratic Party, but that just gets overthrown.
So what you're essentially arguing is like, let the fascists win because they're going to win anyway, and I just don't think that's true. Well,
That is
you-
not-
no,
that-
no, no,
that's
you're-
not
no,
arguing.
no, wait, please,
No, I think this is a better
please,
strategy for them.
Let him go ahead.
Fundamentally, your argument is that the Democrat. So no matter what, your proposition here enables their victory, at least temporarily, because either you're arguing that their victory is inevitable over the weak Democratic Party, or that we don't vote for them,
What is
we vote
possible?
for something else. Under what circumstance exactly do the Republicans not win ever under your scenario?
I mean, there's no scenario in either world where they don't win ever.
I mean, yeah, statistically, no. But you talked earlier about appealing to inevitability. There's a couple of points that you made that I want to talk about. But I appeal to inevitability if we continue doing the zero-sum dance of lesser of two evilism at the polls.
But it's not zero sum.
we
Things have
just-
gotten better.
And things have gotten worse.
You keep referring to like the state of the
Yes.
economy. The state of the
Yes.
economy is not a product of deliberate policy decisions that you can trace to this administration. We're not sacrificing
I
some
can't?
good. Please let me know. What has Joe Biden done that has led to the current state of affairs economically?
I mean, the infrastructure package was a giant giveaway to corporations. It was a compromise on the compromise. It was basically Joe Manchin's infrastructure
Yeah, because
package.
he couldn't get anything better put through. Are you suggesting
He can't.
Republicans
He
would have done
can't. He
better?
can't. See, this is what I reject. I reject this politics of defeatism.
No, stop. No. This it's nonsensical. You
He
can't
could.
you can't just
Well, there
argue
is a
that because
contradiction at the
you
heart of this,
can't
because we're
you
expected to
can't
believe
just
that Joe Biden
argue.
is powerless in the presidency,
You-
but Donald Trump will have infinite power in the
No. You
presidency.
can't just argue that because you don't like a thing that happened, that it could have been better. We all saw how long and grueling and painful the process was of getting literally any kind of economic reform put through Manchin, with the Senate majority being what it was. We all saw, if there was some like super like Hadouken special trick that could have been pulled off there to make that better, and I'm not saying it went perfectly, but the idea that it was some kind of like abstemious.
How about fucking showing up and being like, "Hey, Manchin, vote our way, or we're
So,
gonna
no,
bust
this
you."
is this is
Jump on
like
his
this is a
boat.
very simplistic understanding of how these political processes work.
No,
Sometimes
it isn't. This is
No,
a historical
it- no,
understanding
it
of how
is.
these political.
It is. You are literally saying that a good thing that happened that had to be squeezed through with the greatest amount of compromise possible, that could have just been done better if only Biden had just threatened Manchin.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Okay, how about A, because the kind of people who are hardliners for Biden and his progressive policies are not the kind of people who vote for Manchin. B, Manchin is the only Democrat who could win in his section of West Virginia. C, Manchin already seems to be on his way out with regards to direct collaboration with the Democratic Party. And D, it would have been optically horrible if Manchin, who would not have been threatened in his electoral viability as a consequence of this, would have just come out and say he was threatened and bullied by the president into accepting his anti-coal big government agenda.
And people would have called him a pussy.
No, that's maybe on Twitter. In real life, that's not how
Yeah.
these things happen. Why would Manchin ever cede to these? What can Biden actually offer Manchin?
Okay, so let me give you an example.
Non-broken kneecap.
And by
But
the
like
way,
a real
I
answer,
just-
though.
Let me give you. Yeah, okay.
That is my real answer.
That's not a real answer.
My
It is.
answer is
it's not this. You can't disengage from how politics functions, then get indignant when the outcomes that you arrive at aren't what you wanted. Complicated politics remain complicated even if you approach them with a hammer. We're dealing with a difficult situation nationwide. This is like a very complicated time to be involved in politics. We can't do this like, well, I want things to be better, so like, whatever, they're going to win anyway. The Democrats are weak, so the Republicans are going to win anyway. Like, we have to be very thoughtful and considerate.
In politics.
I'm sorry?
Name for me a simple time in American politics.
Compared to what we're dealing with right now, where there's like massive breaking news almost every other day with stuff like felony charges against the former president, or like an ongoing genocide, or like the fentanyl crisis. There are so many things now that are more escalated than they were
that does
before.
seem actually pretty standard issue. I mean, other than
Compared to like the
coming up on
Clinton
charges.
presidency or even the Bush presidency, things are moving so quickly these days. We're at a breaking point. We're at the cusp of a decision that this country is going to have to make about whether or not we accept imperfect democracy or fascism. And at the moment, right now, as a consequence of failures within the GOP, people are trending towards us. They're doing worse with every successive election. We can't give up now. Maybe if we draw things out a little further, maybe the Dems stay annoying, but maybe the Republicans realize they can no longer win elections if they continue to go down this crazy MAGA fascist road, and they have to dial things back a bit. And maybe the threat level gets toned down, the heat gets turned down, and we have the room to breathe again, to make demands and concessions without the fear that our democracy could literally be broken in half with one wrong election result.
I mean, wouldn't that rely on the Republican Party fundamentally becoming a different party than it is now?
It has in the past 20 years. It went from neocon to fascist. If it can go from neocon to fascist, I think we can break them back into being neocons. At the best. I mean, maybe we can make better Republicans.
it's happened throughout. It's happened several times.
We can
in US
expect
history.
more of the
Parties
Democrats
could
once
change
the Republican
completely.
Party is pushed back from fascism to neocons again.
I mean, it would be a lot easier, I think, to do the whole "I'm going to threaten to vote for a third party" thing.
Because I still heard all these arguments when it was still just a neocon party.
They're still true. You should still vote for the lesser evil, to be sure. I don't think that abstaining
there's
with
no
your vote.
time when we can actually hold the Democrats to a higher standard.
You can't is the thing. You have dreams of doing this, but you can't. Life is suffering. Mostly this. There has never been a point in human history where it hasn't been
and
suffering.
they call Paul the Doomer Jesus.
I know.
No, that's
Totally
no.
defeatist.
You have to find joy in it. There will always be the terrible
joy in
choice
the
you have
whip.
to make. Yes, life is the
Yeah,
whip.
love
At
it.
no point in human history.
Well, I don't ever want to hear that I'm a doomer again.
No,
I don't ever
this
want to
isn't.
hear.
This isn't being a doomer. This is being realistic. There has been no point in human history where
Said
people have
every
had
doomer
the
ever.
luxury of just choosing the political option that made them happy. For most of human history, like 95% of it, and for a majority of people alive today, they don't get a choice. And for
Yeah,
the
I
very
think-
small portion of people historically that have gotten a choice, it's usually a choice between two lesser evils. And by usually, I mean always. We will never have the luxury to not vote for the lesser evil because electoralism is ultimately about that final say, that final choice.
How about a far lesser evil?
If you
Can we
sure,
vote for that?
then do the groundwork, the media work, the advocacy to
When are we going to
popularize
do
those
that?
people.
And stop.
Well, it depends on your
stop-
democratic system too, because not everyone has the American
Sure,
system.
Bernie Sanders nearly won in the primaries in both 2016 and 2020 as a consequence of a lot of work for decades to legitimize progressive perspectives politically. Now,
And he lost
and-
as a
okay,
direct result of the DNC being
Not everything-
propped up and allowed to run roughshod over the will of the voters.
Not everything happens perfectly and right when you want it. The difference between Bernie Sanders being a front-runner contender in the primaries and what the Democratic Party was like just 20 years before that is massive. The difference, like people are like, well, he didn't win. Okay, and we're not all rich. We don't have unicorns, Bernie Sanders, it would have been nice if he had won, but the difference between the Clinton years in terms of what was acceptable, what progressive policies could be put forward, what you could say on TV, and 16 years later with Bernie Sanders, remarkable. But when you talk over that, when you say, well, he didn't win, you're stamping on that legacy. Real progress takes work. Thousands of people, broken bodies, blood, effort, sweat, tears, and a lot of suffering. But eventually, maybe you get it, and the victory is worth all the suffering before, all the work that it takes to end slavery or to legalize gay marriage. And it takes decades and a lot of people's misery. But when you get there, it's worth it. Union workers died to give us the weekend. Maybe we died to give 2050 a better Democrat. But we kind of have to work.
Let's talk about workers for a second, because we've silently, in repayment for the blood, sweat, and tears that workers shed on the line, we've kind of silently, fecklessly, with a just insurmountably cringy shrugged off the economic degradation that's happened in this country. All of their hard-won gains in the labor space have been given back. The company town is back. The robber baron is back. The unaccountable giant faceless multinational is back, Vaush. We've given it all back in favor of this weak, limp-wristed, feckless, defeatist shit.
What are you referring to? Reagan?
What do you mean, what am I referring to? I'm referring to Reagan and every president after him.
Okay, so I agree that labor rights have gone down with time. Right now, they're seeing a resurgence in large part because we have a president who's not entirely hostile to workers' rights. Because we have an umbrella of safety, Biden's presidency, union organizers, the people who work at the NLRB, the Department of Labor, they've had the ability to go out there and make changes that have meaningfully improved the lives of millions of workers, with the potential to do even more down the line. But just as the victory of Biden has given us space for our worker victories, Trump's victory back in 2016 has given them space for their defeats, because the Supreme Court has, in that same time period, using their power that they were given by Trump's presidency, waged a war against workers, ruling time and time again against their rights, their efforts, their advocacy. The difference is clear. In the systems where Democrats rule, we at least have space to speak. In the systems where Republicans rule, we don't even have that. The difference is meaningful. It doesn't mean we're ever going to stop fighting, but we can at least tilt the battlefield to our side.
Yeah, I think that we need more than a tilt.
But you don't get a tilt. You can't keep rejecting reality in favor of an imaginary, hypothetical, better alternative that doesn't exist.
Then why even be a socialist? Just be a Democrat.
Because socialists are the ones who make Democrats do the occasional good things that they do.
By doing what? By putting forth wild ideas that are improbable at the time that slowly but surely become common wisdom.
And
right?
How do you get those ideas realized? You fight for them. You fight,
right.
Yes, but you don't just turn your back on the entire political process. Bernie Sanders single-handedly kicked off.
Hold on. Yeah, but I'm tired of you saying that is my position. I don't know who you're arguing against, but my position is not to say fuck it to the political process. My position is to say fuck it to the duopoly.
That's the political process.
Right. In your mind, that's all the politicking that can be done.
No, I'm arguing the opposite. You're the one who's saying this is the venue through which you have to make your change. I'm the one who's saying your vote every 4 years should be simple and thoughtless. The actual work is in the advocacy you do between those elections. That's where I think change happens. That's where it does happen. You're the one who's arguing that you have to make this big grandstanding ideological defiance of the two-party duopoly at the polls. And I don't think, you can. I don't think anything good comes from it. In fact, I think it makes work harder for the people who actually do that work for the past 4 years. Because you don't provide them that space, that umbrella. All the people doing that NLRB work, they couldn't do it if Trump had won in 2020. They're only able to do these positive things because they were given that space. So we build the umbrella, we build the shield, but the real work, the difficult work, it is a lot of suffering. A lot of people spend their entire lives doing local politics in like fringe Midwestern towns, and they die without seeing any positive change. But that's the nature of politics. That's just living, right? That's always how it has been. If anything, it's better now than it used to be, because it used to be that the people who dared to speak up against the current regime were just offhandedly killed. At least now people get to live through their ineffectiveness, and sometimes we actually do get positive outcomes. I think there's a lot of value to fight for here. I'm not doomer about it. I just think that in the specific venue of like the electoral system and the leader you choose at the end of the process, there's not that much wiggle room. In this case, there's none because of the whole fascism bit.
Yeah, I think that we need to immediately divest ourselves from the two-party system and immediately come up with a better way of doing things. A third party is only ineffectual because largely because the people that whose votes would help it believe that, oh, you know, there's no point in doing it, so whatever. And that kind of seems like what you're preaching here.
You're the one making that argument for voting for Biden.
Let's not waste any of our time trying to create a new workers' party in this country because it's just pointless anyway.
Or just even trying to push the Democratic Party left from where it is.
That's
or not even necessarily left, but just like, hey, these things you guys promise, why don't you actually try to do them?
That's happening.
And why don't you? I mean, very ineffectually, in my opinion.
Yeah, because you have to pay attention to the details. Recently, the White House has been flustering on its position with regards to Israel's support of the genocide going on in the Gaza Strip because they've been.
I mean, Reagan ended that shit with a phone call in his administration. Biden could do the same.
Yeah, I'm aware.
Prop up Israel. All Biden would have to do is be like, "Hey, knock that shit off," and they would stop.
I'm not arguing that Biden is doing great here. I'm saying that real work is being done at every level.
This is about the complexity issue because I think you say I'm oversimplifying. I think you're overcomplicating. Because I think that, yeah, a tire iron can do the job sometimes.
No, nobody is tire ironing.
You can go to Joe Manchin and threaten his ass.
No, you can't do that.
Like, hey, you do like
what you're speaking out of frustration.
Look how quickly Joe Manchin folded, dude. Look how quickly he folded. The minute a Republican challenger rose up, Joe Manchin's like, I'm not going to bother seeking re-election. And then we're told, like, oh, he was such a valuable Democrat.
Yeah. Because no
Who
Democrat
else did get elected with a D next to their name there. It's like, well, it doesn't matter if he's got a D next to his name. If when he's needed the most, he just says, well, sayonara, motherfuckers, see ya.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Joe Manchin is a great ally, but what you're suggesting, I assume, is to literally, like, threaten him into being a better Democrat. It doesn't.
Can I give you two historical examples?
You can't. You do not go. Do not go back 100. If you if you genuinely believe that the solution to like a gridlock in the Senate would have been the actual literal threatening of someone there, you would create impeachment and presidential scandals that would blanket the remainder of the presidency and lock the ineffectiveness.
I don't think if you went about it right. I don't think if you went about it right. Yeah,
pretty sure a lot of presidents have used their muscle in some interesting ways.
So what if he doesn't have any leverage?
Hold on. Let me give you two historical examples where this very tactic has been used and worked. Lincoln used it. He had a whole bunch of operatives who were paying off people left and right, threatening people with investigation, promising promotions within his administration, and he managed to get slavery abolished.
What do you think? Okay, well, there was a civil war there as well. What do you think he could have offered Manchin?
Okay, so let me give you the second example because that's kind of the answer. LBJ. Now, I don't want anybody saying that I'm making excuses for the Johnson administration. He was a piece of shit. He's got the blood of Southeast Asia up to his elbows on his hands. You can't rehabilitate his image. But one thing you can say about LBJ was he knew how to strong arm a motherfucker. He got on the phone with the FBI and said, hey, I want you to look into, and I want you to just imagine a world where Joe Biden did this. Hey, I want you to look into Joe Manchin's business practices. I want you to take a nice hard look at what he's done. I want you to find some tax evasion. I want you to find some unfair hiring practices. I want you to find some illegal offshoring. I want you to find the dirt on Manchin.
Okay,
and then hold on. Imagine that it's not a weak, feckless dementia patient sitting in the chair, but a actual politician. And he looks Joe Manchin in the eye and he says, hey, motherfucker, I'm about to bring you up on 5 federal tax charges. Guess how you're going to vote. What is Joe Manchin going to do? Is he going to run to the the media and say like, oh, I've been dodging taxes for 20 years and Biden threatened me?
There's so many things wrong with what you're suggesting here that I don't even want to go into all of them. I'm
Okay,
not
give it to
arguing
me.
against the strong arming of people when necessary, but first of all, what you're describing, if found out, and it would be found out because it's pretty difficult to keep secrets these days, would be one of the largest presidential scandals in history. It would also give the Republicans legitimate ammunition to attack Biden, not only on impeachment grounds, but also on the idea that he doesn't actually believe in the diversity of thought within his own party because he's willing to go after people who are supposedly moderate like Joe Manchin. This would potentially...
Didn't Trump's administration kind of demonstrate that you can get away with a lot if you're just brazen and ballsy about it?
Yes, but the difference is the kinds of people who vote for Trump are Trump voters, and the kinds of people who vote for Biden aren't Trump voters. You can you can get away with fascist shit when you're a
president that does stuff like that.
No, you can get away with doing fascist shit when you're a fascist with voters who will vote for you for being a fascist. When you're a milquetoast liberal moderate like Joe Biden, your room of permissible...
I'm saying I don't want that.
and that's tough. So fight for 50 more years, and maybe we die having seen something better.
No, thanks. I'd rather have it sooner than 50.
Right. That's because you're impetuous, like a child. You don't understand how.
Yes.
Listen. Everything good, the air you breathe and the water you drink, everything, the regulations that allow us to drink clean water, unleaded gasoline, none of this happens as quickly as anyone wants it to. People have died seeing their dreams gone unachieved and then had other people of the next generation take up the cause and also fail and then continue from that point. The very first abolitionists were in the 1600s. There were people who died in the Revolutionary War on the assumption the slaves would be freed after the British were kicked out.
Here's the thing. I'm sure a lot of those abolitionists were impetuous assholes that wanted slavery done now.
You're arguing that your argument would be for them to give up.
Shoot for the moon to even just like get a 10-pointer, you know?
Your argument is that they should have divested themselves from the political process. Like they fought legislatively for the abolition of slavery for decades and decades without success. Through your argument, it would be like, oh, I've been at this for, I don't know, 10 years and it hasn't worked out. I should just give up. But it was only because of
I'm not saying give up at all. I'm saying push as hard as you fucking possibly can. It's the exact opposite of give up. I think your position is more akin to give up.
You are literally letting
the way they are.
The fascist win, even though his victory will make it more difficult for the actual advocates to do what they need to do to make the world a better place.
How am I letting the fascist win?
If you don't vote for Biden, that's one less vote for Biden.
I live in California. I could vote for Mickey Mouse. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I live in a deep red state where my vote also really doesn't matter.
Unless you're in about 8 states and certain districts within those states are quote-unquote fragile, flawed democracy, your vote doesn't count.
Florida used to be a swing state, and people giving up because they're already majority in the state is how you lose solid blue states. And we'll never get how can you complain about the Democrats being bad in Louisiana when you're saying, oh, it doesn't matter if I vote for Dems here, I'm in a far red state. That's what they think. They think, oh, I'll give up on it because they're far right. You're saying, oh, who cares because it's far right.
Well, yeah, that's not him.
Okay.
I'm still in a red state.
And I did vote, by the way.
Okay.
So just so you know.
So yeah, so the logic is the same. This isn't about, like, we're talking about one day of work, not even work. Every 4 years, you show up. It doesn't matter whether or not you think it does anything. It's a very simple civic process.
Let me just, I want to just clarify this really quick. I have every intention to vote in the election. I just don't know if I'm going to vote for Biden.
Who would you vote for if not Biden?
I don't know. I'm undecided.
Well, it's either Trump or throwing the vote away. So I guess between those two options,
I might choose to quote unquote throw my vote away then.
Which is like not voting, as far as I'm concerned. Third party votes are not voting, as far as I'm concerned.
Your voting isn't voting, TJ. No true voting. Yeah, that dude.
I mean, it's a two-party system. I didn't make it that way. It is that way. We have to acknowledge
that.
You
kind of are perpetuating that, though.
Yeah, it's that way because of the complicity of people like you.
No, it is that way because mathematically, the system we have incentivizes that.
There's actually other countries that don't use first past the post that still have robust third and fourth parties.
And fifth and sixth.
You mean they do use first past the post?
Coalition. You're talking about coalition.
Yeah, there are different rules for voting in different countries that procure different outcomes when it comes to what you actually have to deal with. Mind you, the absence of a two-party system has not made things any less in England. Like,
I agree with that.
yeah, it's like, so there,
Sure.
the problems that we're facing here, like
I mean, they are
the
a little
two-party
less fucking
duopoly.
England, right? They've got a national
No,
health
they're pretty
plan.
fucked right now.
They're pretty screwed
Yeah,
up.
I mean, not if they
They're
get
trying
cancer.
they're trying to privatize healthcare.
If I get a cancer diagnosis, I'd rather be over
but
there than over here.
Sure.
That's in the process of being rolled back.
In the process, but isn't let's not lie about our level
that's like
here.
a holdover from a bygone era. Like the current political climate of the UK is horrible.
Incidentally, the reason the NHS is getting privatized is because people let the Tories win too many times. As a consequence, even though
they've won a lot of elections over there.
yeah, even though the Labour Party is not the glorious socialist vanguard party that might have once been 120 years ago, there's still a meaningful difference between allowing conservatives to tear apart your systems and allowing liberals to preside over them competently.
See, I mean, but the problem is that if conservatives are running better campaigns and getting more people to vote for them, then that's how it is. Like, why is the onus always on like the non-voter or the third party voter to fix the problems for the Democratic? Like, bail us out again. It's like, do something for me then. Do anything for me and I will. If Joe Biden did one thing that I actually was impressed by,
NLRB rulings, was that
I'd
not
vote for him.
the NLRB rulings? Was that not the Inflation Reduction
I got him
Act?
a little bit of the way there.
The Inflation Reduction
We
Act?
gave him props. We were on our show saying, yeah, good job.
Him going to
this
the
is like-
UAW.
That's why my chances of voting for Biden currently sit at 2%.
Okay.
Because of that.
So the reason they need money is because so either they take money from citizens or they take money from corporate donors. I mean, you can decide which one you think is less concerning with regards to where the money's coming from to the Dems. Withholding civilian donations and having them rely more on corporate donations will not make the Dems more amicable to proletarian interests, for one. But for two, like, the only thing they need to do to be a better candidate for voting than the Republicans is to be better than the Republicans. You don't have to donate. I don't think I've ever donated to the Dems broadly. I've donated to a few candidates specifically.
I've donated to Bernie Sanders, and I know a lot of his coffers were emptied out into the DNC.
Yeah, even I gave money to Bernie.
Yeah.
So my money that I gave to Bernie, I think some of it did end up going to the Democratic Party.
Money in politics. Citizens United was a disastrous decision.
Oh, a good chunk of what people like us donated to Bernie ended up in Joe Biden's pocket and Hillary Clinton's pocket, respectively.
Of course,
so,
yeah, it did.
Gotta love that DNC.
We can't withhold because things aren't as nice as we want them to be. Bernie winning still would have been a significant
Isn't that the whole
improvement.
point, though? Like,
I mean, here's the thing. You think I'm not fundamental? I don't know about Paul's position on this. I don't want to be conflated every time.
Yeah, watch yourself.
And I'm sure he doesn't want to either, because our positions are unique from each other's. But as far as I'm concerned, like, I don't think vote lesser of two evils is fundamentally faulty. But I just want there to be a little bit, like, I guess for me, it's a matter of degrees. Like, if it's Hitler and 99% Hitler, I honestly don't give a fuck. If it's Hitler and 60% Hitler, okay, maybe we're getting somewhere.
Do you really not think that compared to Donald Trump, Joe Biden is at least 60% Hitler? Or less?
what would a
I don't know.
Palestinian say?
You know, I'd have to go I'd have to really sit down and put it down issue by issue, look at the cultural impact both ways, look at the the far-reaching effects of both outcomes. Because I mean, here's the thing, and I've always said this, and I've said this for every president throughout my lifetime, and I know that to a degree it's ignorant and sort of like self-absorbed and stuff like that. So, you know, I'll head that criticism off of the past. I realize it, and I'm not putting 100% stock in this, but like, if you somehow were to cast an enchantment on me where I was incapable of knowing who the president was, and I could only judge it based on like what's going on in the rest of the country, I don't think I'd ever have realized we were under new management. Like, on just a personal level.
I genuinely
maybe that's
think
like white privilege or some shit, but
maybe. I think a lot of that is also because you engage with things, as a lot of people do, I think much to their detriment, from a very high level day-to-day news on a federal level, like, perspective. And a lot of the stuff that you concern yourself with is also like inseparable from broader economic trends that would have happened under any president. So as a product of that, like the very real, like if you want to know about the differences, don't listen to the news. The news will always sound the way that it does right now, no matter whether or not something good or bad is happening. Listen to somebody on the local level. Listen to somebody who works with administration, somebody who works for local schools, somebody who does legal work, somebody who's like engages directly with like the activists, NLRB, unions, anything. To them, the differences are massive. Right now, the culture of hope for unions in America, for like what's happened with SAG-AFTRA and the UAW, massive surge of hope. What's been happening with Starbucks, like the in terms of like worker advocacy, this is the best that we've been at. This is the best we've been doing in over a half century. Like for you say you can't tell the difference. You talk to people whose job it is to pay attention to the differences, and it's clear as day. Now, to people like, say, the Palestinians, yeah, no, I wouldn't go and ask them to vote for Biden right now. Not just because, you know, they're getting bombed, not an American, blah, blah, but also because I acknowledge that there are going to be kind of common trends of suffering under Biden or Trump or whatever else. I do think Trump would have made it worse, but still, very bad as it is now. But we can't toss that out. I mean, what we have got, what we have done is still worth fighting for and preserving.
I applauded Biden's NLRB ruling, but let's not overvoice the positivity here. There's still a gigantic gaping loophole that hasn't been addressed by the NLRB. I haven't heard much talk about it being addressed by the NLRB. I'm certain Biden has been mum on it, which is the fact that companies can still indefinitely refuse to agree to a contract. There's no like weight over their head to agree to a reasonable contract. There's no litigation process that a union can engage in order to do that. And so there's still a giant loophole for corporations to be able to just dig their heels in, which they will use. And it hasn't been addressed by Biden. And it probably won't be addressed by Biden. So
I mean, they can strike.
Yeah, well, they can strike, but we've seen that Biden is willing to step in and end those strikes too, right?
He ended one strike because it was right before the midterms, and then he quietly went behind the scenes and tried to get those workers he ended the strike for.
So he f***ed them and then gave them a reach around. Sweet.
Essentially,
at least they got a nut. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, yeah. Considering the fact that no other president, to my knowledge, has ever done that, at least not since, I don't know, like the Roosevelt days, I guess.
By the way, the contract that Biden forced on them was pretty paltry in comparison to what they were asking during the strike, by the way.
Yes, because it was not. Yes, I agree. It was not everything that they wanted. But in terms of like, if we're taking a look at like overall good or bad for unions, he has been better for unions than any president in our lifetime by far. The rail strike thing is unfortunate. I'm not defending it, though I do think that he's done more to amend for that than any other president would in his stead. And all the NLRB decisions, the general advocacy for striking, the fact that the NLRB is like more actively involving itself in defending the rights of striking workers, these things are huge. But again, like I feel like right now I'm arguing about like the particular arrangement of confectionaries on a cake when my opponent has served me a slice of shit. Like Donald Trump wouldn't do, you know, some of this stuff a little better and some of it a little worse. He would do none of it, and the stuff he would do would be anti-worker.
Aren't you kind of arguing that you would rather eat a turd that has a dollop of Cool Whip and some little icing rosettes on it than a raw turd? Isn't that kind of like the essence of your position here?
I mean, I'm getting forced to eat one of them is the thing. There can only be one of those. Like I don't have the choice to not do that, and I guess I would.
I mean, you do have the choice to not do it. You've just chosen not to do it.
No, I don't. There will be one president. One
right, but you don't have to actively grab one of the turds and eat it.
No, I don't grab the president. The president's voted in by the country. There will be a turd in my mouth. Also, I think the difference
definitely going to be a turd in your mouth.
I think the difference between the two turds is a lot more significant than what you painted out to be. We're talking about the most pro-union president in our lifetime versus Donald Trump.
It's chocolate dipped. It's chocolate dipped.
No, I know. I entertain these analogies because I'm not exactly like really that much of a Biden fan, but in reality, if you can't see the significant difference between the two, it's because you're ignorant politically. There is a degree of, oh, well, aren't they all bourgeois parties anyway, that comes across as woke when in reality reality, what you're doing is just waving your hands at 1,000 complexities that people whose job it is to pay attention to this would be able to immediately identify and care about. We're talking life or death differences. This whole shit versus shit with some frosting, reserve that for like the party era back during which Dems and Republicans were basically indistinguishable.
I mean, you invoked the shit with the frosting analogy. That wasn't mine.
You were the first one. No, I said a cake with confectionaries.
And you're served a piece of
We
shit.
need a replay.
I said cake with confectionaries.
Rearranging the confectionaries on a piece of shit.
No. The confectionaries were on a cake versus the shit. I think that Biden, when it comes to union rights, I think he's the cake.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go there. If the NLRB secures the right for a litigation process for unions to force these companies to come to the table and actually gives teeth to the union movement again,
well, they have been. It's better than anything that we've seen before in our life.
When a company can just cross its arms in front of its chest and go, "Nuh-uh," labor unions cannot flourish in this country.
Well, that's when the strike happens. But again, this is still better than anything we've seen before.
That's not true. In my lifetime, we've seen better.
Which president in your lifetime has been better on unions?
In my lifetime, Jimmy Carter.
I strong disagree.
We got a dissenter here, a fact checker. For $5, Parker says, fact check, Biden ended the railroad strike after the 2022 midterms, not before.
Okay.
When did he end the strike?
I don't know if that's... I don't know if that's true.
Not that that was a particularly... Not that that was a particularly strong excuse to ask an entire rail union, but, you know...
Jimmy Carter destroyed the trucking union.
Wait, why can I not find this? Oh, late November. It looks like. Yeah, okay, that would have been after the midterms. My apologies.
I don't really think in my lifetime matters much. When I was a kid, both of my parents were blue collar union laborers, and we lived like rich people.
If only they had the privilege of being pro union today, they could see a lot of hope.
They were vote blue no matter who, Democrat unionists. Their whole lives, voted the party line, campaigned, walked the line with other unions.
Based.
And you know what it got them? My parents were lucky to retire. They were lucky to retire.
So you understand how you're like making spurious correlations, right? Whether like because them voting for Democrats did not make the economy worse. Like,
yes,
do you think they? No. Okay. Wait. I'm sorry. So which Republicans could they have voted for that would have made the economy better by their retirement date?
Which president destroyed Glass-Steagall again?
I'm asking which Republicans should have won. I specifically want to know if you think that they had a worse economic outlook. Because you are saying that their bad economic outcomes were a product of them voting Democrat, and I want to know. Okay, so I want to know which Republicans winning would have made the economy better.
I didn't say that. You're trying to force me into a conclusion I didn't make. I didn't say the Republicans would have made the economy better. I said the act of voting cyclically for nothing but Democrats, because they're the ones that show up to a labor rally now and again, oversaw the same jobs that my mom worked and retired on, and bought houses on. The people that work that same job at that same factory in my hometown can barely afford the rent on a 2-bedroom apartment.
This is happening everywhere right now.
Yes.
How is this the Democrats?
Because the Democrats have done nothing to shore it up.
Okay, so what would Republicans have done better?
I'm not saying they would have done it better. I'm saying that the people that are supposedly the best choice for me,
they are the best choice,
presided during their time that they had, which was substantial.
Yeah, it's not supposedly, they are. If a bad thing would have happened in both cases, you can't blame the better option for the bad thing that happened if it would have happened anyway. I mean, at that point, you might as well be blaming them for what?
I mean,
the wind?
It just like provided a lot of issues where there's not really much of a choice. Like
there isn't a choice.
On Israel, where's our choice?
You don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's so many issues where there is no choice whatsoever, and we're just supposed to accept that. Well, election cycle after election cycle, and if we try to change it,
I'm not saying don't accept it.
The moment we try to change it, it's like no. You got to Just go along with it.
I'm not
it's
saying
the best you
don't
can fucking possibly do.
I'm not
It's the
saying
best
you
we
have
can
to
do.
accept it. There are plenty of things you can do with
And
regards to advocacy and political pressure.
I wanna
I'm
ask you a
saying
question
no.
about-
Again, no. Please, again.
I want to change.
This is political engagement. Okay, there are plenty of things that you can do to change the duopoly and change what is politically acceptable.
Lay it out for me. Lay out the change. How do I
It's
change
called
the duopoly?
everything other than who you vote for on election day.
What is it?
Advocacy, pushing funding, arguing with media organizations.
I already do advocacy.
No, hold on. Go to local town hall meetings. Write letters to your local Congress people. Write letters to local people, like mayors, town commissioners, even like local city planning boards. That can do a surprising amount of good. Hey, in the past decade or so, we've seen a recent rise in legitimately progressive politicians. Right now, yes, our government may be broadly pro-Israeli, but America is more pro-Palestine than ever before. And why? Did that just happen out of nowhere? Did that just happen out of the ether? No, it's because people worked, and they've been working for longer than any of us have been alive. There have been Palestinian advocates who for decades have had their cries for justice met with deaf ears. For decades, and only now will people listen. And yesterday, just yesterday, John Oliver, a generally presentable media personality, presented a fully pro-Palestinian take to an audience of millions of people. You can do stuff. And you know what? The consequence of you doing good stuff is that people vote smarter in future primaries and you get better presidential candidates to pick from. Without changing the first past the post system or the way we currently do things on a structural level, it's still always going to be a lesser of two evils deal.
Don't you
but
think
that doesn't mean you don't do anything.
We could save those Palestinians a lot faster if all of those people who say, hey, I want a choice on Israel, were like, I don't know if I'm voting for a Democrat this year. Earn my vote.
Again, stop with the fairy time bullshit. If all of these people somehow magically coordinated, listen, over here in reality, if some of these people all magically coordinated, if some of these people all magically coordinated, and they all decided on a single wedge issue, if they all decided on a single wedge issue to shift their vote on one wedge issue to another candidate who would have to be developed and organized and funded and promoted entirely on this wedge issue, they would then have to have more people voting for them than the entire unified Republican Party. Ergo, what you're talking about has never happened, cannot happen. You are talking about fantasy bullshit. You're not happy with how tedious reality is. You are not brave for throwing up your arms in the air. You are not brave for throwing your arms up in the air, ignoring reality, and only saying you'll lift a finger off or lift your ass off the seat if some implausibly, impractical, historically unprecedented shit happens that no political analyst would ever say would happen. But you're like, only for this will I, politics king, get out of my seat and do shit. You're not special. And no, you are. You're special in a class sense. You're more privileged than the people liable to suffer. If this country goes under, I can leave. I'm rich. But there are millions of people in this country who not only don't have that privilege, but they work tirelessly to put the effort in where you think there's no point. Your day for work is not at the election booth. Your day for work is 4 years before.
A politician to have to earn the vote of a voter. That's not unprecedented. That's literally politics
whining
101.
that you're not being catered to. You have it better than 90% of the people on this planet.
We're not talking about me personally being catered to. We're talking about the huge block of people who oppose the genocide going on in the Gaza Strip and to be heard.
And they're doing and they're doing work. And their lives will not get any easier if they just don't participate.
If those politicians have to spin on that issue to change on that issue in order to secure those votes.
You're just speaking for them. You're privileged. You're privileged and arrogant, and you're angry, and you're using them as a shield. You're using them as a shield.
So of course these people would have a huger incentive than ever to
You're
want to
hiding
win.
behind them. The math doesn't change. The math doesn't change for you or
That's
for
right.
me,
Democrats
for nobody.
Can't win unless people who are against the genocide still vote for them.
If you want the world to get better, you do the work between the elections, and during the election, you make the best choice, and then you get your ass back to work. You, like me, spend a lot of our time whining online. That's our jobs. But the difference between you and me is that I don't think I'm special for my abstemiousness from the process that other people have lived and died and bled for, trying to build a world comfortable enough that we could be dipshits in a computer chair. You can do the work. You have to do the work. You do not have a right to complain and pretend that you are smarter for keeping your hands off the work.
Well, why are
There's
you
people
assuming,
who are
why
bleeding
you,
and dying right now, and we want to vote for the party that's allowing
The
it to happen.
people who are bleeding and dying right now, the most likely people to bleed and die, the poorest people in this country, those people vote Democrat. The poorer you are in this country, the more likely you are to vote Democrat, because in spite of the fact that your average American, poor or rich, is a hard, a significant proportion of people understand if you are poor in this country, there is a difference between living under a Democrat and living under a Republican, and you are trampling over that and the work that other people have made, the sacrifices. Do you think that winning is the hard part of politics? Losing is the name of the game. It always has been for every group all the time ever. Most of life is learning to deal with compromise.
let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Because I think that this is pertinent. You seem very agitated at the idea that publicly, vociferously withholding your vote from a politician can
You're not
have a
special,
profound
TJ.
effect on their policy.
That's true. You're not special.
Like, you do understand that Biden is less likely to move if Democratic voters act like you than if he acts like us, and then if Democratic voters act like us, right?
Well, I advocate for the ruthless harassment of Democratic politicians to get them to demand a ceasefire. And
You announced your intent to vote for Joe Biden before the election was even over the last time.
They don't, yeah, and I will continue to. They don't care if you threaten to withhold your vote. If voter retention, or sorry, if voter abstemiousness was something that motivated them to change their behavior, the fact that this country has like 60% participatory in our federal elections would have been enough to make a difference at this point. That what matters to them is which political bloc is most likely to respond to positive messaging when it comes to voting to us. So when leftists continuously signal that we are the pickiest motherfuckers in the world and we will act against our own interests to throw our hands up to not vote, they're going to shift more with the moderates. The reason why the Democratic platform shifted to the left after Bernie Sanders normalized that shift left was because Bernie Sanders proved that there was an active, mobilized, young, left-leaning contingent of voters in this country. He proved the existence of a voting bloc that the senile in Washington didn't know about before. They didn't care about them. We need to prove that bloc still exists. We can be rowdy, we can argue, we can threaten a wide variety of things. But my job isn't to posture, and I'm not good at theater. So the math stays the same with me. Now, I don't have an issue with people who want to reserve the vote right now. What I have an issue with is the idea that abstemiousness from this process, a lack of participation, or willful, like, disregarding of reality with regards to who we're going to get at the end of election day, these things bother me because there is hope. I'm not pitching hopelessness. I hope constantly for the work of the people who do stuff in between the elections. I just don't like the idea that the day to take a stand from work to complacency, whether you're doing something or not, is at that voting booth. Because I don't think that. I think that it's a marginal part of political activism.
So
Yeah,
you don't think so you think that Democrats don't care about losing, but you also think that fascism is inevitable if Trump wins. So how does that track? How does it track that Democrats wouldn't care about losing when our democracy hangs in the balance?
I think that
isn't this the best time possible to extract concessions from the Democratic Party?
Well,
when they're so under threat.
Because the incentives and motivations the Dems face are a lot more complicated than we give them credit for. One of the reasons why they're so tepid,
Seems like that's going around, the complications.
One of the reasons they're so tepid on the Israel thing, one of the reasons why their messaging has been inconsistent and shifting is because, for example, Israel has a heavy degree of corporate and political coordination, both with local police departments and with our military defense contractors, meaning that no matter how powerful the Dems are, it actually is pretty politically risky as a president to call for a ceasefire. Still think he should, mind you, but they're not being abstinent on this issue because they're like, willfully negligent or evil. Now, there are people who are drinking the Kool-Aid pretty hard, Fetterman being a good example of them, and there were the Democrats who voted to censure Rashida Tlaib. So, like, I'm not arguing that they're all, like, unwillful participants with their hands bound. What I'm saying is we have to acknowledge that there's more at stake here than just whether or not, like, the voters, or sorry, the Dems hate their voters, you know? We
Even
have
the
to
majority of
factor in-
Republicans support a ceasefire as of the last polling I saw.
Yeah, no, it's a huge wedge, and we can be really good about this wedge too. We can be really, really effective in trying to drive the Dems left. And at the moment, we're winning. We are more pro-Palestinian than we ever have been in all of human history. Well, I say human history. It's only 100 years. Since the conflict began, American voters have never been this pro-Palestinian. The fact that half of Republican voters are going for that, insane.
Do you think that a vote for Joe Biden is a pro-Palestinian vote?
I mean, compared to Donald Trump, I think it's a less anti-Palestinian
You think so?
vote. Yeah, Trump has said stuff that leads me to believe he would be much more hawkish.
I mean, isn't the action?
Yeah, I don't think Trump's
really,
gonna have any good policies on that.
I don't think he is
Personally.
either. But I don't see how you could possibly call a vote for Joe Biden.
I mean, I don't think there's
a
a pro-Palestinian vote here.
There isn't, and
No,
that's part of the problem.
There are two anti-Palestinian candidates, though I do think one of them is meaningfully worse than the other. I just think it's the Palestinian thing. Like I said, this is a tough time.
I don't know how meaningful it is, but I'll agree there is maybe some difference.
I agree that it's not super meaningful. Like, this is an issue where there seems to be a pretty strong bipartisan consensus to be, like, ghoulish on this specific matter. I just I think
against
that,
the will of the American people, by the way.
yeah, no, for sure. And that's, I think that's largely a corporate thing. I think that's because for decades politicians have weaponized disingenuous accusations of anti-Semitism as a way of shutting up political opponents, not because they care about Jews, but rather because in the legacy of the Holocaust, people still understand fundamentally that anti-Semitism is a big no-no in a way that we haven't really done with other kinds of racial or ethnic bigotry, because we tend to codify those, and anti-Semitism gets called out for what it is or sometimes what it isn't. So there's a lot of, like, social there, but the left is leading the charge on the right end of this issue, right? And there are meaningful consequences to that. The White House is buckling under pressure. We know that. Staffers have admitted to it anonymously when talking to the news. Like, there are
Doesn't
people
that support
quitting.
our position of withholding your boisterous immediate support for candidates and extracting concessions by being loud and unapologetic about your opposition to their genocide?
I'm totally okay with you guys, with everyone.
Why don't
being
you
loud.
then why don't you do it? Because you have been openly just not only saying that you plan to vote for Biden no matter what, but encouraging your fan base to do it too, which kind of doesn't give you a whole lot of leverage when it comes to it. Definitely dumbs down the leverage, don't you think?
I think that the opposite doesn't give any leverage either, because as I said before, that would just incentivize Democrats to go after a moderate voting base.
I mean, your voice is reaching the halls of power. Where you were just at the White House, weren't you?
Advocate for harsh criticism and pushback, but at the end of the day, I think the best way to advocate for that, in my particular position, is to refer to the voting interests of others as a general bloc.
I just don't see what the incentive to give a shit about the harsh. I mean, like,
if we just
and his molasses-like lack of mobility on this issue. That he looks at popular creators like yourself that are basically saying what TJ just said.
I mean, let's be honest, Biden's not watching Vaush. So.
I'm saying
sure
like,
he is. I've seen a picture of it.
The people that handle Biden, the advisors and the speech writers and the policy wonks, they are watching Vaush. Look, they're not only watching Vaush, they're watching Hassan, they're watching Destiny, they're watching social media trends where this type of shit is rampant. Biden 2024, baby, before the presidency is 2 days old. That doesn't really engender you a whole lot of leverage when times like this pop up.
The impression that I've gotten from the data that I've looked at and the tendencies in the halls of power seem to be that threatening to withhold votes does basically nothing. It does not encourage the Dems to go further left-leaning.
You just said...
So it just helps them write us off. However, there are good reasons to pressure them, and there are things that they can be incentivized with that aren't us directly threatening.
What are you pressuring them with?
What do you think Democrats are threatened by, like, people withholding votes from them? Like, That doesn't make sense. Politicians
hold on.
specifically,
I want you to explain.
want almost more than anything else is people to vote for them.
Vaush, please explain to me how you're pressuring them.
Specifically, people on the left withholding votes. The
Well, I'm
Democrats.
not talking about just the left. I'm talking about a broader movement of America.
I know, but I am on the left. And
Sure.
the tendency to reject the bipartisan framework can be justified differently depending on where you are in the political spectrum. If there are moderates who are withholding from the electoral process because they feel like there's no real difference no matter who wins, that's a different issue than this specific dynamic, this engagement. I think ultimately there are two main things to threaten with, okay? One is, as a progressive issue becomes more popular, the more legitimate the threat becomes that Democrats being bad in it will lose moderate voters. This has been how we've won most of the positive shifts in the Dems over the past few decades. Not by arguing people on the left want it. Who cares what the left wants? A bunch of college students, degenerates, and sodomites? No. What they care about is, does the median voter care? And the median voter, by default, this person doesn't exist, but we can extrapolate. If that person doesn't care at all, whatever. But if they can be made to care, like, for example, with gay or trans rights being made a majority issue rather than a marginal issue, then suddenly it becomes politically popular. Notice how Hillary Clinton went from thinking marriage is between a man and a woman to thinking that gay marriage is acceptable, and Obama as well. Like, that marker, that was the 50% marker. As soon as the median voter cares, that's what the Dems care about. That's what I threaten with. Your position on this,
Well, by that standard, they should have already flipped on Israel.
It's only been a month. I genuinely think something's going to happen soon.
It's only been a month of the most brutal bombing campaign in modern history.
Keep in mind, we're talking about a paradigm.
More bombs dropped in the first day of this war than we dropped in the first year on Afghanistan.
I know that.
We're talking about like a 10-mile wide strip of land. The devastation is utterly unreal. It's only been a month.
I know that, yes.
It's not even something that you can say, dude.
About an unprecedented paradigm shift on one of the most like untouchable geopolitical issues in the past half century of American politics. For in the space of a single month to go from that being like an untouched issue to there being mass protests and popularity for Democrats plummeting even with moderates, that can take some time. I could be wrong. It's possible they don't respond well to this pressure, and that also wouldn't surprise me because, again, there's a lot of like corpo shit involved here. But I do think there's still a possibility that there is a move here. And also, the other big thing we threaten them with is the popularity of the issues they push for. I do agree that, on average, like, politicians want to get voted in. Like, you know, that's kind of their thing. Even if they don't necessarily seek the far left as a stable voting base. And as a consequence,
probably not a great one to go for.
Yeah, they're looking to edge in things that are popular. The more popular certain things are, the more comfortable they'll be supporting them, even if there's opposition. A good example of this would be climate change issues. Climate change has been a known issue for well over half a century, but only in the past few decades has the popular understanding of climate change gotten to a point where Democrats, who have always, not always, but for a while now, known about the issue and kind of, teeter-tattered at the edge of it, but not really committed to it. Now, Joe Biden, he's not perfect at it, but the shift in rhetoric from now to even like early Obama or hell, late Clinton, massive. And a lot of that is just because they know it's popular enough that they can get away with it in spite of the potential corporate harm. So that's...
Let's cancel the big pipeline and then make a bunch of little pipelines, Jack.
That
isn't the win that you're selling here to me.
Can you engage with what I've said and not with...
I'm engaging with what
potential
you said.
Counterexample.
I don't care what the rhetoric from Biden is. The rhetoric in the lead up to this, when he was trying to convince people to vote for his old decrepit warmongering racist ass, was, I'm going to get you $15 minimum wage. I'm going to get you a $15 minimum wage.
Your indignant betrayal at him not fulfilling every campaign promise like every other politician ever means nothing to me. His rhetoric and his policies have been better on climate than were in the past.
I don't know what's worse, my indignant betrayal or your placid acceptance.
So no, listen. This is you. This is the child tossing their dinner off the table.
Yeah,
I am
you
not
love calling people children.
I am not
You've done
accepting.
that one
No, I am not accepting
I'm
anything.
not a fucking child.
When I state the fact
Beverly Hills
that
fucking
Biden's
piece of shit
rhetoric
and
policies.
Child, you bitch.
Wait, be less emotional, okay?
I've done more stand-up labor than your lily white Beverly Hills ass has ever done. Don't call me a child on my show.
Okay, then, like
Go
an
fuck
adult,
yourself.
listen to what I have to say.
I will
all right?
as soon as you
It is
agree to
not-
stop being a shit.
Can you show me then? I need, listen, okay? Like a child myself, I lack object permanence, so I need to witness you not act like one for 5 seconds while I talk, all right? You can say it's acceptance, it's reality. The rhetoric and the policy have gotten better, and it's a product of public acceptance. You providing examples of Biden doing bad things or saying that rhetoric itself isn't enough, these are not meaningful counterarguments, okay? Things have gotten better. I'm arguing for hope. I'm arguing for a process that makes
You got
things
a weird
happen.
way of arguing for hope. Life is suffering, and you just got to accept it and suck it up because that's just the way it is, Jack. Man,
And now we have
that's some real thin gruel hope you've got there that you're selling.
And now we have weekends. Now we get to enjoy.
Yeah, for how? No, do we really though?
Yes.
See, you haven't held a 9 to 5 before. I don't know what a weekend was. Saturday was just a day of the week to me when I worked my jobs.
Yeah, and that's
So why
rough.
don't you like?
It's a shame
you
you've
just
turned
assume
your
everybody's
back
got
on the
weekends.
proletarian interest now. We have
Turn
weekends.
my back on it because I started my own business. Go fuck yourself,
Okay.
bitch.
Do you believe that there is value in pushing and suffering for a good political outcome, even if it takes a lot of time, as every bit of progress we've ever enjoyed has
Absolutely.
happened before?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Okay, so all I'm saying is most of the good things that we enjoy today were not born of some big, decisive, sweeping rejection of the status quo. They were usually, but this is like revolutionary fantasizing. It's something that a lot of people fall into when they feel doomer. What actually tends to happen is that a bunch of cynical people drop out, get injured, become alcoholics, and die at home, whereas the people delusional enough to cling on to hope in spite of all contrary evidence actually make the change. People who go in every day, no matter how bad it seems, and work and work and work, and they fight, and the cops show up and they bust their union, and they shoot their union lead, but they keep coming back for more, and then eventually, one day, there's enough public pressure that something happens. But that
You're like
process
Mother
is
Teresa.
suffering.
You know that? You essentialize suffering. Oh my God. It's the people that grind their lives away while the boot is on their neck constantly with little to no relief ever. That are the, you know, lionize that a little more without ever having experienced it.
We all suffer. Some of us suffer for a reason.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Jesus.
I think we all
Is
suffer
that
for a
is that
reason.
too messianic? The idea that we have to work for good political outcomes, is that too like optimistic and hopeful?
When are we?
Is that
When have we
naive?
advocated for not working for political outcomes? We're just we're talking about tactics here, bro. Are you seem like really invested in this idea that me and TJ are advocating for, like, oh, let's just sit around on our asses because nothing matters anyway. I know that's the easier thing to argue against, but the fact that you've spent such a profound amount of this appearance on our show tonight misrepresenting our position and tilting against windmills. I don't know how to tell it. Let me put it explicitly for you. I am not advocating for people to do nothing political. I am not advocating for people to sit around on their hands and do nothing. I'm not even advocating for people not to vote. I know, must be shocking, right? What I'm advocating for is for people like you and I and everybody else to stop focusing so much on re-electing Democrats and to maybe think about the tactics and the power, the little bit of power that we do have within that system. Maybe start using that in a smart way and maybe start building something else. Now, if that's childlike, my apologies. If that's fantasy-like, my apologies. If that's too hopeful, my apologies. That's who I am. That's what I hope for. That's what I advocate for. So have I cleared up your confusion on my position?
Look, in 1920, Lenin wrote a letter addressing and regarding British workers and their relationship to the British Labour Party. He thought the Labour Party was a bourgeois institution full of social democratic cowards that weren't capable of getting the work needed done. But he advocated that people vote for them and engage in their political processes nonetheless. He did this because despite being as much of a hardline revolutionary as anyone could reasonably be called, given the fact that he led one, he believed that there was value in sheltering under legitimate political organizations that were meaningfully better than the alternatives and doing good work within them. I disagree with Lenin on basically everything he's ever said or done, with the exception perhaps of this. This is how work is done. Lenin knew to work with liberals in Russia when fighting against the Tsar. Mao knew to work with the government when fighting against Japanese colonizers when they invaded. In all points...
What about Marx?
Marx said that communism could be achieved in America non-violently through voting. I'm not joking.
Yeah, Marx also said that you were only to work with the corporatist parties when the outcome for workers was assured, and you could use them basically as puppets.
Yes, and as we've seen time and time again...
That's not what you're advocating for. You're advocating for voting for our oppressors.
The difference between Republicans and Democrats with regards to workers' rights is assured. I'm not arguing for complicity or for acceptance. I'm arguing for the strategic use of the platform and the power available to us to get stuff done. Every bit of good change that we have ever seen in this country has been a product of this strategy. I'm not arguing for complacency. I'm arguing for its opposite. I'm arguing for intelligent engagement with and deconstruction of these systems. One of these requires that fascists not win. That is a prerequisite. Under fascism, we will be killed. Not we in the broad general sense. I mean me and you. We will not live through that, assuming that we don't just flee, which I would, because I have the money to. There are lots of people watching this who would be killed and couldn't flee. I think that maintaining...
Yeah, for the record, I'm not one of those people. I wish I was rich. I can't. I'm stuck here. I'm stuck here. So
then we have to not shit where we eat then. It is very important, at the very least, to maintain the baseline platform upon which good advocacy can be built. If nothing else, liberal democracy. Liberal democracy, this is the battlefield socialists most flourish in. This is where we make our difference. If we are trying to fight within a fascist system, the secret police come for us. If we're trying to fight within a monarchy, the secret police come for us. It is only under a liberal democracy that we are given the space necessary to even argue our positions. These positions take time to flourish. I'm not asking you guys be happy with the Dems, and I can't force you to vote for anyone. I'm only saying that there is value and meaningful difference in a presidency under Biden versus under Trump. And that's the main thing I want to stress. Not who you vote for, but when you compare, oh, he's a shit versus he's a shit with like frosted cupcakes or whatever.
If this were an election that was just like, hey, I'm just looking at this in isolation. I'm looking only at this one election. Then I would have to agree with you. I'd have to. I think it's completely rational when there are two candidates and one is a little bit better than the other to vote for the one that's a little bit better. If that's all you're looking at in isolation. But my problem is down the line. My problem is every election that follows. Because I'm just scared that, like, right now, we're not willing to hold the Democrats to any standard. I'm not just talking about the left here. I'm talking about Democratic voters across the board. Anybody who's ever voted for a Democrat. And I voted for Joe Biden in 2020.
Oh, sorry. I thought you could do. No, I understand. I just don't think if it means threatening that the Republicans win, then it's a non-starter. What we're essentially doing is we're arguing
But my problem is this. I'm sorry. I was just hearing some audio piping in from somewhere. I wasn't sure where it's coming from.
Okay.
The thing is this. I mean, I'm just kind of scared that somewhere down the line, the Republican Party is going to win. It's going to be, I mean, look how divided the country is now in terms of this vote. So I'm just scared that if it's not this election cycle, it's the next election cycle or the one after that. And they're going to be just as far right as they are right now because no one's ever showed that they need to be anything other than that. And if we can all agree, I think that the Republican Party has moved right. You agree it was a neocon party, an election cycle or two ago.
Yes.
So what my big fear is just like, we've seen that the Republican Party is moving right. And, the criteria being put forth is that we're just going to vote for Democrats as long as they're to the left of Republicans. So let's say this trend continues. Republican Party moves further and further right. The Democrat Party is free to move further and further right itself because as the baseline moves right, so can they. They're free. It's like the ratchet effect. They're free to move in one direction and there's no pressure to pull them in the other direction. So,
but that's not happening. They've been moving left like considerably.
I guess you could maybe argue on a few fronts.
I mean,
I mean, this is an issue where I will invoke complicatedness and say, like, whether the Democrat Party has moved left or right is kind of a complicated issue, because I think they've moved left on some
Depends
things,
on the
and
issue.
they've moved right on others.
Well, it depends on the issue. Like gay marriage, I mean, overall, America's
And then it depends
better
on
that.
where you're starting from, because if you're starting
Sure.
from Clinton, you could say, well, maybe they've moved left considerably on a few things. If you're starting from pre-Clinton Democrats, you know, you'd have to say they've moved right on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, you have to have a frame of reference.
Economically, of course, like Roosevelt is to their left. I'm not denying that, but the current shift is towards the left. I don't think that there's like a broad, like people are more polarized now than they have been before. For me, it's like it's like you're on a very narrow cliff edge. You're like shimmying along with your back to the wall, and you're trying not to fall in front of you. And falling forward is the Republicans, and continuing to shimmy is the Dems. And you would do anything to get out of that situation, but the only thing that works right now is continuing to shimmy. Maybe down the line the cliff abruptly slopes out, and there's not a big drop. Maybe if you go far enough, the ledge that you're shimmying on it widens and you can walk normally. There's maybe things can happen in the future. Maybe circumstances change, like you see like a rock embedding that you can climb onto and you can like escape the situation altogether. Right now, there's only the ledge and a very long drop. I don't think that nothing can be done while operating within this duopoly. I think that even if we just accept the idea that Democrats have to win because Republicans' victory is unthinkable, you can still get a lot of good work done. And I think that we should all be wary that in the future there might be like a wedge that can be used. There might be a point, but right now, like, every trend is pointing towards the strength of the duopoly. We can rage against that all we want. We can say, oh, if only people would do this, but they're not. Like we operate in, like, if only everyone would just be communist. Like we operate in probabilistic trends. We have to understand what people are likely to do and operate within that, because if we do the opposite, you know, we're throwing ourselves off the ledge prematurely.
If we're consigned to a duopoly, then shouldn't we advocate for the strongest the Democratic Party that's the most in line with our values as possible? And embracing some really
there's lots of
ideas that most Americans agree with. Now, obviously, there are some ideas on the left that most Americans don't agree with, but there's plenty that they do. So why not try to get the Democratic Party to embrace those ideas specifically?
And why
not try to do that by saying, hey, if you want my vote, you have to earn it, because that's the thing you want the most from me.
Well, for sure. You got to primary them.
So the time to do that is just in the primaries. And then when the general election comes along, no threat there. I'm just
literally, yes. That's the point of the primaries. Yeah, that's the time.
Okay.
But there will be no primaries this year, sorry. Yeah, I don't think that the presidential vote is very uncomplicated and very important. It's like choosing to keep the lights flipped on, basically. You can do all the electrical work in your garage that you want. You can build whatever you want. You have all the time in the world. But every 4 years, you have to keep the light switch on. And right now, like, the darkness, if we ever allow it to overtake us, might not be fixable. I mean, given enough time, anything is fixable. You know, the Third Reich only lasted, 15 years? But I really, really don't think that would be, like, an effective vehicle for positive change.
Yeah. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit more alarmist, but I feel like the woods are burning and we need to immediately intercede in every way that we possibly can. And that doesn't preclude not voting for Democrats. That doesn't preclude not trying third-party options. I think everything's on the table, because I think that now more than ever, the substantive, like the most substantive issues in my mind that we face are not being addressed. Climate change is, you know, you kind of tried to back Pat Biden on that, but I don't think he's been great on the environment, despite what overtures he might have made.
Only said he's been better.
I mean, I don't know. I don't think better matters right now.
It does,
I think we need a paradigm shift. No, it doesn't.
Every climate activist in the world would disagree with you. Like, you can check their statements.
Every biologist and geologist and climatologist in the world would disagree with you.
No, they wouldn't.
Band-aids aren't.
Wait, no, they would. Wait,
helping.
why would you say that? They would absolutely advocate Trump over Biden over Trump, like 100%, like with almost no exceptions.
They might advocate for Biden over Trump with no exceptions. I'm saying they wouldn't agree on, like, little bit better being meaningful at this point.
First of all, I didn't say that. Second of all, it's not a little bit better. Trump flat out denies the existence of climate change. And third of all, I think they would argue that even if things don't go perfectly, it's better for things to be a bit better than it is for them to be not better at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see it from that perspective.
Then don't invoke theirs, because they do care.
Maybe my understanding of the seriousness of climate change is incorrect.
It is serious, which is why we shouldn't accept worse people being the president on it.
The main thing I've heard with them is advocating for change now. That's the main thing I've heard when I've read articles and they've interviewed people who are really into this issue of climate change. That's mainly what I hear.
Dramatic change now.
Yes,
like
and limiting emissions and trying to stop it from raising 2 degrees Celsius, or or the catastrophic consequences that the planet's going to bear, or I guess humanity. I mean, the planet itself will probably be.
Well, I agree, and they also want Biden to win. Many climate advocates and organizations advocates and organizations are like almost militantly pro-Democrat, because the difference between
that wouldn't surprise me.
And no, like really, you can look between it, like the Republicans don't even believe in science. Like the official perspective from Republicans isn't just that climate change isn't real. They just flat out do not believe in any federal engagement with science.
I've talked to plenty of them. I know they say climate change is like so-called climate change, and you're like, it's not so-called. It's far from it.
Yeah, I mean, Democrats are still a pro-corporate party, but at the very least, a conversation can be had with them. Like there are interviews that have been done with like climate scientists or like EPA administrative experts who are basically like, yeah, the Dems don't do enough. But when I worked under the Trump White House, like if you went to talk to them, they would just flat out like not listen. Like you would talk to them and they go
awful.
Like, yeah, they go like, and then you just get turned away. And your job was just to sit there collecting a paycheck and desperately trying to keep data as the world ends. Biden's a huge step up from that. I know the bar is low, but again, like that's why we can't hit that low bar. Like
I don't
the bar is low. Let's not hit it.
I don't think we can afford how low the bar has dropped. We're in the midst of a
we need James Cameron.
Yeah, it needs to there needs to be cataclysmic change, and it needs to happen like 20 years ago.
Well, we can't.
We're fucked.
We can't time travel, and there's only going to be 2 presidential candidates in 2024. So we do what we can with what we have.
There's going to be more than 2 presidential candidates.
Sorry, the final,
two
viable presidential, yeah.
But I mean, let me just ask you this:
only 2 in all of America. Only 2 people.
Let me ask you this, though.
Yeah, there's a lot of wackos that think they're going to be president. Of course.
Let me just ask you another question here. You might understand. I mean, you definitely have a better understanding of civics, stuff like that. So, I just want to ask. So, let's say all of America lost its mind, right? Everybody in America lost their mind, and we all just decided, like, we're all going to go vote for Jill Stein, and she wins in a landslide, right? At that point, yes or no, does Jill Stein become president?
You mean if she legitimately won the popular vote?
Yeah. If she won the electoral college.
Electoral college, yeah.
I think so. I don't think she'd get very much done, but I think that the corporate superstructures that keep the lights on in this country, I think they can operate mostly without the president. Like even if the president just flat out doesn't play
my only question is like, how is it the case that only Democrats and Republicans are viable then if the voters could choose something else?
Because that's who people vote for. They're popular because they're popular. It's tautology.
So it's all like, you admit it's just like an Ouroboros of shit forever eating. It's like a turd forever eating itself.
Yeah, it's historical inertia. I mean, that's the case with pretty much all political parties. I don't think there's
most of human history.
Yeah, they root themselves in like they have like specific like corporate relationships, and like their name recognition is a big one. Like
maybe that's something we could try to change though.
Well, that
do a little differently. I don't know.
I agree with. I think that like this is one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of independents running Democrat in main elections, because I think that in that way you benefit from the soapbox, but at the same time you can be like, yeah, and if you want more like out there populist takes, take a look. I think you can legitimize it a lot that way. Like that's why Bernie ran as a Dem, of course. If he ran as an independent back in 2016, he wouldn't have come even close, because he wouldn't have gone to the debates. He wouldn't have thrown Hillary Clinton to the left it
was clearly a deliberate choice. I mean, he's an independent and he caucuses with the Democrats. It was clearly a deliberate choice.
Yeah, I think it's like being a leech to the power, really. I mean, that's what Lenin advocated for, like he distrusted the Labor Party, which I guess he should have, considering what it turned out to be. But like in the meantime, you can go to their meetings. show up at their debates, change people's minds. And, you know, that doesn't put you on top immediately, but it makes you a lot healthier than you used to be. It was only 20 years ago that the socialist movement in America was dead and silent. I mean, properly. Like, the closest thing we had to populist left-leaning activism back in the early 2000s was like the anti-Iraq war protests. And that wasn't leftist. That was just left of center, really. In terms of leftist engagement, it was dead quiet. And now, like, you go into any downtown city street and you are tripping over flyers and pamphlets from local like Antifa or socialist organizers. Like, it's crazy. And it's happened not just in your lifetime, but like in like modern teenagers' lifetimes. Like it's happening so quickly. I just think we've got some momentum going. We got to keep at it. And a lot of that is like extra electoral engagement. And a lot of that is also the fact that the squad in the Dems, you know, by operating under their wing, taking shelter a little, they can get a lot of messaging out that wouldn't otherwise be heard by so many people. Like AOC and her little Insta stories, or Rashida Tlaib censoring probably will open her up in the long run to a lot more positive press than the negative press she's getting now. I think.
It's entirely possible. I mean, it raises your profile. I mean, for sure. I mean, having that action. I mean, AOC's profile has been nothing but raised by Republicans attacking her constantly, invoking her constantly.
Yeah.
It's a shame she hasn't done jack shit with that profile. Same, she hasn't spent that political capital in a meaningful way.
I mean, she's one of the most popular politicians in the country, and she has been popularizing left-leaning perspectives on basically every political issue she talks about.
But when the chips are down, she gets told how to vote.
Yeah, she does get bullied. Yeah. We all saw that vote with the Iron Dome and Pelosi, which is at this point.
I mean, that was devastating. I mean, and that just goes to show you that this hope of getting
I think she's a great advocate, but I don't think she's really all that great of a...
Yeah, I mean, we don't, unfortunately, we don't need great advocates. We need great actors. We need people in
we do need great advocates, but we don't need them when they act. You don't need them in the halls of power. You know, it's if she wants to be a cheerleader, that's one thing. But
she's just one congresswoman midst about 400. I mean, you know,
but there have been times when, you know, there was a time when the margin was razor thin, and their little enclave could have affected more change.
Well, I'm not a force voter. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know. Which you were against, by the way. The one
I was not against the tactic. I was against the issue.
No. I was talking about Vaush.
I was clarifying where I stand on it.
Vaush was vociferously anti-force the vote, you know, basically the squad doing what we were told they were going to do.
I think it's more anti-force the voters, you know, the Jimmy Dore crowd. People weaponize that issue pretty maliciously. The fact of the matter is, no matter how good a politician is or may seem, they will make mistakes. Bernie's made mistakes. He's not even calling for a ceasefire right now. If we lowered our margins, if we narrowed them only to people with whom we will never take issue, we will never find.
Even FDR had the internment camps and shit. So.
Yeah, I tend to be pretty permissive of mistakes made by advocates and allies in positions of power because they're bound by so many invisible chains that we can't see as audience members. Like, who the knows what conversation Pelosi had with AOC? Obviously, I would like AOC to have like puffed out her chest and gone like, "No, Pelosi," and then like slammed the no vote down, which wouldn't have done anything because it was like 5 million to 1 to yes in favor of the Iron Dome funding.
I don't know for an absolute fact, but I'm pretty sure I can give you a fairly succinct summation of what that conversation was.
Probably that we would malign you for being anti-Semitic.
Well, no, it was basically this. You're a bit of a rising star in the Democratic Party, and that star will fade if you don't vote with us. You think you're getting any kind of support? You think your profile is just because of your charisma? Your profile is at my behest. You will bow to my desires and my whims, and you'll vote how I tell you if you care about your career. And she does.
I don't think that was exactly what was said to her, but I'll admit that I or neither of us know.
Who knows, so we can make sure.
I have no idea.
This is one of the big reasons why Bernie Sanders was so careful when he ran, both in 2016 and 2020. He knows the standards set for him are higher, so he has to be more careful. It's not fair that he has to be more careful, but he was smart and he navigated that environment pretty effectively, to the extent that while he was shit on by a lot of people unfairly, he's also generally accepted to be likable. Like, there was a lot of browbeating from the DNC and a lot of unfair play, but they never succeeded in making him a reviled figure. Not even close. He did too well. He's too likable. He's too much of a crotchety grandpa. So he smartly leveraged that image and was able to push his message to so many people. And now there are literally millions of Americans who've been inspired to left-leaning politics based on like their access, their exposure to what he said. You know, I just
Literally,
we have to be like the little fish that eat the plankton off the big fish, except in this example, one day we become the big fish and then we eat the other big fish.
Yeah, well, I don't think that day is coming under the current auspices.
It's getting better.
Homo sapiens, no one has said that, dude. Literally not once.
I mean, as we've pointed out several times, it's getting better and it's getting worse.
In terms of populist left advocacy in mainstream media, it's getting massively better very quickly.
And in terms of economics, it's getting massively worse very quickly.
But that's not a product of the Democrats shifting right in economics.
Yeah, and see that you're giving them a huge pass for saying that.
No, but it's not. I'm not giving them a pass.
They provided no meaningful pushback and oversaw the undoing of some of the most important legislation.
I agree, but that's not them shifting massively right. That's a continuation of the party duopoly's bourgeois.
Them deciding to allow conglomerates and robber barons to come back and like completely and utterly obliterating the legal protections that prevented that isn't a shift to the right in terms of
I thought
politics?
we're mostly talking Biden's administration, but even if we go back
we're talking about the whole output of your very, very well-known and very, very well-worn tactic of vote blue no matter who.
I don't know.
Lesser of two evils.
I don't know what these things have to do with one another. It's a fact
because
of the matter.
Because you were just talking about how much better everything was, but a whole generation of people can't buy a house.
So again, this is spurious. This is spurious conflation. You would fail out of a college stats course. The economy is getting worse, not only between decisions made in Republican and Democrat administrations, but globally. As a matter of fact, America's weathering it better than most. Basically every Western European country and most other countries that are even developed.
You know why, right? You know why?
There are a lot. Okay, if you're about to boil down why the global economy is faltering to Democrat policy, you're not, right?
I'm going to boil it down to the absolute inability of Democrats and Republicans to steward the economy.
Yes, I agree.
Because 2008 was allowed to happen because regulators were asleep at the wheel in both parties, and that's what caused the current global economic downturn that's never recovered from.
That's a huge part of it. Yes, absolutely.
No, that's the part of it.
Yes,
that's it.
Yeah, it's a huge part of it. And as you said, it was a product of a shared bourgeois tendency in both parties. Therefore, it's not really relevant to the conversation when talking about Democrats versus Republicans, or whether or not Democrats have shifted.
Well, it is relevant when the position is, shouldn't we expect more from our Democrats?
We should always expect more. What I'm talking about
I don't know if you're expecting more if you're going to give them your vote no matter what they do.
We're cycling. We've talked about this.
Yeah, it's going in circles.
I don't think that attitude
round and round we
accomplishes
go.
anything. I think there's a lot of evidence that my attitude does accomplish things. I think that we've seen recently especially, but broadly over the past few decades, a rise in the prominence of left-leaning voices, both in America broadly and in the Democrats specifically. And I think a lot of that is because of institutional savviness that some of those actors have engaged in specifically. I think that savviness requires compromise and sacrifice, because there's no way to be some kind of hard-lined, principled, like super zealous advocate while also being politically effective. You kind of need to draw lines somewhere. And as a consequence of that, sometimes they do stuff that disappoints us. I get disappointed too. By Bernie, now with the ceasefire, by AOC, then with the Iron Dome stuff. But I'm still heartened.
Look, don't get me wrong. I'm not expecting perfect politicians here. They're politicians. Promises will be broken. Deals will be made behind closed doors.
No one gets where any politician.
I'm not advocating for some like perfect, ultimate, wonderful Democrat that's like, oh my God, they're glorious in every way and they shit gold, because that's never been a thing. That's never going to be a thing.
I don't think anybody's advocated for that.
Right. Yeah. I'm not expecting the perfect Democrat to come along and just be like this wonderful, magically good candidate. And anyone who falls short of that, I'm not going to vote for. What I do expect is a little bit better than this. This isn't good enough.
Well,
The Democratic Party as it stands right now, not good enough. Needs to be better.
the Democratic
And I
Party
don't think
or
that's a
Biden?
reasonable standard because it's been better in the past.
Biden
He
is
should
the
be better
Democratic
again.
Party. He's the head of the Democratic Party.
Well, sure, but there's hundreds
Yeah.
of federal members of the Democratic Party with regards to just elected officials. There are different
Sure.
people, and the. I mean, I think there's value in distinction here. For example, we know that there are probably a lot of left-leaning people in the Dems who keep kind of quiet because, like most politicians, they see an incentive in sort of holding the cards close to their
They're
chest.
playing the game.
Yeah, which is fine. The more popular left-leaning perspectives get, the more likely they are to get louder. It's just a matter of process. We don't disagree that the Biden's not enough. We don't disagree that the Dems need to do better. I just think that this strategy for making them better and for providing better outcomes, in addition to the existential threat the Republicans pose, is different. Like, we differ on that, but I think it's a meaningful difference. And I feel like you've consistently tried to equate the Dems and the Republicans in a way that I find very irresponsible now. I think that the two parties are very similar in geopolitics and in their bourgeois tendencies. So economically and foreign policy wise, I still think there's a difference. I still think Biden's better, practically ended the drone war, so that's cool at least. But again, genocide in Gaza.
Now he just sells those drones to other countries or lends them to other countries to do it. I don't know if he ended the drone war. I think he just abdicated responsibility by giving it to somebody else. Right?
Well, we sold weapons previously, but whatever the case is, like I agree certainly that there's a closer parallel there. When it comes to preserving the stability of democracy in this country, there's no comparison, and we need that democracy because, again, they will kill us if we lose. We won't get a chance.
Economics is social justice. People that are LGBTQ are vastly overrepresented in poverty statistics. The same is true for minorities, immigrants, and migrants. These are all the people that desperately need our help right now. And by allowing these feckless Democrats to sell our what do you mean I keep not engaging? What do you want me to engage with?
You keep saying in response to me, I literally just said I don't think Democrats are enough, but now you're saying, well, Democrats aren't enough. I know that. I agree with you. I am proposing a strategy that I think not only works, but has worked, visibly worked in recent times with regards to making things better. I think there are meaningful differences we can push for. All I'm advocating for is the right way of doing this. And I also don't think the Republicans can win. Again, they will kill us. They will end democracy. We will not even get another chance. It is like proposing any solution to our problems that encourages
how likely do you
Republicans.
really believe that is?
Well, no, I fully believe it. I think there's a real chance.
So you think Trump wins, it's done. Democracy's over. Full stop. The
camps fire up.
It's very possible that he doesn't fully succeed.
From where I'm sitting, where I'm looking at it, am I denying that Trump has those ambitions?
See,
obviously,
this is what I mean by the death of the revolutionary practicality.
I don't know. I feel like it's pretty unlikely.
Lenin knew to ally with liberals against the fascists in Tsarist Russia. Mao knew to ally with the government against the Japanese. We have to know which the greater evil is. You need to know both which the lesser and greater evil is. In your case specifically, yes. I don't think it's guaranteed. Like, it's not 100%. Nothing is, but I think there's a very reason.
Like gut feeling or analytical feeling or whatever you want to call it. Trump wins. Chances that there's not enough chances that we're not getting a 2028 election if Trump wins. What's the Vaush forecast there?
Total random guess, but I'd say like maybe 30%.
30% chance there's no 2028 election.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's a very unqualified guess. Of course, that's the best I can do.
Sure. I asked for that. I'm not going to.
It's a ballpark.
Fire on it. I understand. I asked for.
Obviously, there's aspirational in the Republican Party to make that happen.
That's also a far cry from the constant fear mongering of like the camps will open on day one and democracy is over.
In fairness, 30% is a pretty scary number.
30% is a scary number, but you want to know what I think? You want to know what my prediction is? More of the fucking same.
Okay.
More of the again, this is
wealth from this is what I mean. This is what I mean by reactionary politics through abstemiousness. You think you're being elevated, smart enough to see the bullshit like a South Park character. You are failing to identify the broad side of a barn. Like every successful socialist movement ever has been able to tell the difference, and everyone that ended up dead couldn't. The Stalinists in Germany back during the 1930s couldn't tell the difference between the Nazis and the Social Democrats, the social fascists. Which mass graves do you think they were buried in? We can't afford to make these mistakes. It's pivotal. The Republicans are screaming from the top of their lungs what they want to do. There is no equivocation. They have been calling for the removal of the FBI as an institution.
They have been since I was born. What's your point?
No, you are not paying attention if you think that. You're vaguely gesturing, you're waving, I vaguely remember them being that. No, you have no idea.
I don't vaguely remember
no,
it.
Then you remember nothing. Then your mind on this subject is a void. This is incomparable. This is like you think the Patriot Act being passed compares in any way to the protracted multi-year-long campaign on every level of the GOP coordinated to delegitimize the election? They did an insurrectionary attempt.
The creation of unitary executive theory and its application by both parties since George W. Bush is another thing. I mean, the fact that the president can declare war without congressional approval is a modern
construct. Just again for clarity's sake here, okay? Right now we have a democracy where you can vote and the person you vote for can win. The world that he wants to build is one in which every single member of government that is either elected or appointed fundamentally cannot accept a victory from a Democrat. They were pushing to rewrite state laws on election counting that would allow them to throw out opponents' votes.
They don't even need to do that.
A question.
I understand gerrymandering.
You can't keep it. You're describing the difference between like stubbing your toe and getting bricked with a hammer as like, well, they both hit me. You have no idea what you're talking about. What you're engaging in right now is not enlightened leftist perspective. You're engaging in bottom of the barrel, South Park, Cartman-ass tier, zero IQ, centrist, moderate, hasn't learned a thing about politics in their entire life, bullshit equivocacy. How dare you? You claim to care about the legacy of your Union parents? You would literally preside over a death camp and go, well, you know, Biden probably would have done this too. Like, it's disgusting.
What?
It's senseless. If you genuinely believe that there is a comparison to be made, I beg you to educate yourself because there is none. It is not comparable.
I think that there's an obvious comparison to be made, and I've brought up the reasons why over and over tonight, and you seem to get more and more frustrated every time I do, but I don't hear an answer to it. You keep saying things are getting so much better. I'm saying while things got better on one hand, they got far worse on another. And you seem to want to divorce. You seem to want to divorce your tactic from that problem. When the truth, Vaush,
you don't need to divorce two things that were never married.
The truth is, I don't have a hazy memory when it comes to what it was like to live under George W. Bush or Barack Obama. I'm not 12, bro. All right, I was a tax-paying 9-to-5 worker during both of those presidencies. So let's be real about this shit.
You're literally doing the bit too right now. You're like, well, I wore my blue jeans to work.
Well,
you don't know shit, dude.
Maybe I remember how it went. Yeah, I know that triggers you young
think
people.
Is wise cynicism. Like, you think you're like, what are you, Rick Sanchez? You just don't know shit. You do not know. This is why you keep running back to the same, well, Biden's bad. I know. Great. Tune into my streams. Find out more reasons he's bad. You think you're brave or evocative for pointing out that things have gotten bad? That
you need to write a book like
everyone knows this.
How Biden is the worst thing to ever exist and why you should still vote for him. That would be
99% Hitler, buddy. Look,
yeah, I know.
It's fundamentally disqualifying in a conversation about politics for you to pretend that there's an equivocacy between previous and current Republican attitudes towards the dissolution of democracy. This would be like you saying, well, they're both equally bad on climate change when one of them doesn't believe in it, except you did do this, of course. I'm making fun of you. One of them doesn't believe in it, and the other person is just not good enough on it. There's no point in making comparisons. You clearly have a very strong emotional attachment to being a disillusioned, doomer, like cynic for whom nothing will ever be good enough. And that's fine, but don't pretend it's politics.
As I am, so you shall be, my friend.
I'll be whipping around to like fake calm after freaking out when I called you a kid isn't going to make people forget about the earlier part.
I know that relegating lived experience to some dude with no teeth sitting on his porch going, back in my day, the blacks weren't so uppity or whatever is the easy way to do this. And I also understand it's the easy way to do this to just go like, oh, you're fucking retarded, bro. Like I could do that too, Vaush.
haven't
I could
called
sit
you
here and
retarded
call you
yet.
yeah, you did. You said I was stupid and simplistic and didn't learn anything
Yeah, I
from
didn't
my
say
life.
the word
And
retarded.
by the way, by my
Called civility
years,
politics.
my decades of political advocacy, I didn't learn anything. And I got no idea how nothing works. You just think because you lived through a bunch of shit, you got a fuzzy memory about Obama.
Out of
The
curiosity,
fuck
do you
off.
genuinely think that being like, I don't know, what, 45, 40, whatever, means that you have like some hidden insight into politics that isn't possessed by people who are merely 30? Like, is that like the bar you fall into where you're legitimately doing the like, well, no matter how wrong I am, at least I have slightly worse knees? Like, what are you getting at?
I'm making the position that people, when you live through something, you might have something to speak to that a person that didn't live through something wouldn't. And I think you'd agree with me on pretty much any other subject, except like if I was a Hiroshima survivor, you wouldn't be here going like, oh, you think you know more about getting a nuke dropped on you just because you had a nuke dropped on you? You know what I mean?
Do you
I
think
don't think you disagree.
having,
I don't think you
having
would
a nuke
disagree in
dropped
that
on you
instance.
gives you like a
No,
degree
I don't
in
think
physics?
you would disagree. I don't think you would disagree in that instance. But for some reason,
no, I would
the fact
happily
that
tell a
I've lived
Hiroshima
through
survivor to their face
the
if they
fact-
were wrong.
Hold on. I understand that the fact that
Well, that'd be foolish.
I've lived through your stated goals and your vaunted bullshit my whole life. You think vote blue no matter who is some kind of like edgelord bread tube thing that you came up with?
Just math.
I lived it. I was you 20 years ago. I canvassed for John Kerry. I canvassed for Al Gore. I was out there going like, look, dude, I know these guys suck, but we can't handle another George W. Bush presidency. You know what else isn't new? This argument that you're making that the world's about to end if Trump gets elected. Democracy has been over every election if we don't vote Democrat since God was a boy, bro. This is not a new edge that you're slinging. You're slinging old hash.
I don't
You're
like
slinging
you're
old hash.
arguing against the concept of math. You're basically saying, bro, you've been telling me to breathe air my entire life, and you and it hasn't even fixed my debt. I'm still in debt. Like, what do you like? My student loans haven't gotten paid yet.
No. I'm not saying I'm still in debt. I'm saying I'm in worse debt than my parents were.
Yeah, then manage your finances better. Look, I don't know what to tell you, okay? We've gotten around to this.
Dick. Manage your That's why people
There
are
we go.
working
We got
3
him.
jobs, right? Manage your finances better. You posh, rich Beverly Hills lily white milquetoast piece of shit. How do you even open your bourgeois mouth to talk to workers? How do you even bring yourself to do it?
Well, considering the fact that basically all unions in America, except for the police unions, advocate voting for Biden over Trump, it's actually pretty easy for me to talk to workers. They agree with me. I don't know.
I'm the one that's making equivocation fallacies,
you have a very strong emotional attachment to being like contrarian on this specific subject. It's not something of which I can cure you. I'm not a magician or a wizard. I don't know. The best case scenario, the best outcome here possible is that this just ends up being another like tepid, meaningless whatever. You can continue complaining after Biden wins in 2024.
Better.
I don't want to be proven right on this.
What a
okay?
total dick, dude.
In the
manage your finance. Yeah, why don't you go talk to the exploding homeless population here in California? Oh, dude,
march of history.
You realize
Nice,
you're basically Patrick Bateman when he bent over to talk to that homeless guy. You should get a job, Hal. What are you gonna pull the knife out and slit me in my dog's throat? You total corporate zombie.
Okay,
you should manage your finances better. Go and your rich ass self.
So as is being increasingly evidenced, I think you have a very strong emotional attachment to this particular subject.
Yes, look, I do, because I was raised in a labor leftist household where we didn't namby-pamby around and pussyfoot around in politics and make doomerist bullshit.
Didn't you just say your parents voted blue consistently?
They did, yeah.
Then there we go. That's your pussy politics. What do you want?
Yeah. My parents also hit the line.
Nice. Good.
Yeah, nice.
I don't understand. If you think that I'm offended by the concept of your parents being harder workers than you, I'm not. I think it's cool, you know? People used to work pretty hard for their livings. Nowadays, they still do, but in different ways.
My parents are harder workers than me now? What do you know about my work history, Vaush?
About as much as you've yelled at me during the course of this conversation.
Me and T-Day's dad was a famous scammer, so we don't know shit about work. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you can talk to them about that, but if you're going to talk to me about my chops as a laborer, I've been employed since I was 16 years old.
You know which party tends to aggressively push for lower minimum working laws at a state level?
Which party? Go
it's-
ahead and tell me.
It's the Republicans. They tend to be
Is
the ones to
it?
push for that.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, thankfully, we got the Democrats to push back. Oops. Child labor's back.
Wait, I don't know why you're saying oops. The child labor stuff is largely happening under Republicans. When Dems are in charge of their state houses, that doesn't tend to happen. Like, wait, what? Yeah, there is a difference between the parties. I don't like you tend to assume there isn't on a state level. Never mind. Look, like it's like with I keep forgetting if it's Michigan or Wisconsin or Montana because my brain is small. But there was recently in the Midwest a state that just barely managed to eke out a Democrat majority, and as a consequence, they've done communism over there. Michigan, sorry, it's chat's saying it's Michigan, and then now also chat's saying it's Minnesota. It's Minnesota actually. They're doing like communism over there. They have like a 1-person lead in the state house, and they've been doing a bunch of insanely good shit. Like I think that the difference between Democrats and Republicans tends to be more pronounced on the local level because on a local level it's easier to win without being a big corporate stooge, whereas you need to be one if you're going to win presidency. There are too many connections to pull into there. So I think that on a local level the difference is more pronounced because like there are local Republicans that are saying insane shit with basically no pushback, and local Democrats that are doing really cool stuff. So I don't know, you can see stuff like that, and I feel a lot of hope when I see it personally, because a lot of those Democrats who are running in like Minnesota or whatever, those are like really left-leaning people. They're just running with the Dems because they have the name recognition, you know, but they are like pushing. I
know this is something that you don't know, you know, and I don't hold you to that. I've always advocated for people to vote down ticket and shit. Like I've always said, your local elections, great. Yeah, go down and vote in your local elections. Involve yourself civically to the, you know, I've never advocated against that.
I'm glad. Well, then we should have a Democratic president because Trump has openly threatened to attack Democrat state governments to prevent them from being able to get done what they need to get done, both with laws at a federal level that would restrict the ability for states to sort of engage in their own jurisdiction, or by outright, like, for instance, Trump threatened to withhold COVID aid money to a blue state. I forget which one, though, because their governor had been making like some Trump critical statements. So wouldn't it be a good idea then to have a president who's not actively antagonistic towards those down ticket results?
Can I ask a question? I want to ask a question.
Hold on, yeah, because he says I never engage.
Okay, go ahead.
Like that being a more localized election, I don't necessarily disagree with, you know, what you've said. They would be better off. My argumentation is not against voting in your local elections,
but like getting Biden
but I think that you're downplaying or maybe just neglecting to mention the absolute magnification power that federal politics has over state.
True, which is why we should have better presidents, I imagine.
Absolutely. Well, we don't disagree on that. I don't think Biden's it.
Well,
it's Biden. I just want to ask, you know, we talk a lot in here about the preservation of democracy.
Right.
And I'm kind of curious why that's even being tossed out as a value when apparently there's only one party that you can vote for. Like functionally, I mean, according to you, Vaush, you can only functionally vote for Democrats or democracy is destroyed. So doesn't that mean democracy is kind of already destroyed because there's only one party you can vote for?
There's a strong possibility it could be. You didn't say
I mean, like
at certain.
Right.
We do have like very institutionally cemented parties, but there is a very strong correlation for the most part between what people want and what actually happens in our government. Now, that's not a perfect relationship. Obviously, for one, like
I mean, I've read studies that say the opposite, that we're functionally an oligarchy and that it basically
I'm familiar with the study you're referring to.
You know, you've heard this study, I'm
yes,
sure.
There are critiques of its methodology, but still, if you want to make that comparison to how, say, like China's relative like aspect ratio functions on that, it's not perfect. And a good example
better
of
than China, great, good for us.
Well, they're not a democracy, but a good example of like a problem with this, of course,
neither are we really, but
is manufactured consent, where even if people want something, they can be told to want something by being lied to or being sort of selectively given information. And as a consequence of that, like, democracy there is sort of a sham. Now, the problem with that in America is that by all measures, we're actually like a pretty democratic country. We're not perfect. There are countries that do it better, like the Scandinavian countries. But by most standards that look at this, both in liberal and leftist sources, there is a pretty strong relationship between like voter will and what's going on, and that's not completely captured. And in this environment, we have rights. We have a right to a freedom of speech, more freedom of speech rights than almost any other country in the world, which we should absolutely not take for granted. We have political rights. I'm not saying it's a perfect or.
I mean, there's
like,
a whole lot of issues where it seems like
We're
the will of the
described as a
people is
flawed
not done.
democracy. If you look at democracies, that's what we're called. We're called a flawed democracy.
And we are a flawed democracy. And if you compare that to like the total list of countries in the world, or like the total population of the world, like include India, China, Indonesia, like there's a lot to be thankful for here. Now, again, is it enough? No, we should fight for better. But what we are is a lot better than, again, like Turkmenistan or Sudan or Saudi Arabia.
Oh yeah, Sudan's a horrible one.
Well, it's, you know, I personally would not want to live there. You can call that my a white Western bourgeois preference, but you know, it seems kind of dicey there.
Yeah, I don't think many people are gonna actually want to live in South Sudan.
Yeah, and anybody who would get upset at you for that should go do it themselves.
Yeah, like go
I
do
don't
it. Tell
think
me
they
how it works
would.
out for you.
Yeah, I again, like, it's very worth preserving here. The difference here is very meaningful. Like, for instance, a good example of this would be that General Attorney Barr, under Trump's administration, with the Black Lives Matter protests, was pushing around the idea of using the Insurrection Act to arrest people at protests that turned violent. Now, this would be probably one of the most authoritarian things to have ever happened in this country. Like, this would be up there with anything Nixon did, possibly quite a bit worse. It was like very, very, very bad.
I mean, Japanese internment camps bad.
Yeah, no, it'd be in that ballpark. Yeah, we were talking
Okay.
about the mass arrest of at the very least hundreds of thousands of people, overflowing detention centers, prison cells. Like it
We already have that.
Okay, and then very quickly a bunch more for political reasons, as opposed to
Sure.
like the right. Yeah, so that was something that the last Trump administration was very close to doing, like very, very considering. That's just one thing. From the destruction of the administrative state to Trump like openly threatening to sue journalists or like bring charges against them for reporting accurately on what his administration is doing.
Well,
to
I mean, that's the goal of the incarceration industrial complex, which Biden is super cozy with.
you really can't identify that Trump's administration is openly flaunting their willingness to do the worst version of broad trends that have been problems in this country. You seem to be under the impression that there is a comparison between outright fascism and the fascistic tendencies of a bourgeois state. There is a line there, and that line is a bullet train called the Trump administration. The thing that brings you from bad tendency in a democracy to a fascist government is, in this case, the fascist strongman. That's what we have to be careful about. Yes, we have problems with our prison system right now. Yes, Joe Biden authored the crime bill. He's hardly bloodless here. But what he did not advocate for was the mass political arrest on insurrection charges, no less. Not disorderly conduct, not rioting, not disruption of a public space. Insurrection. Hundreds of thousands of people, potentially millions, depending on, I mean, they could have gotten millions if they wanted.
Well, that's what Trump's trying to tell to his supporters now with his trials, that it's a political prosecution.
Yeah, and as a product of that, the majority of Republican voters don't believe in democracy anymore. They believe that the deep state is always out to get Trump, and no matter what happens, he's always the one who would have legitimately won. And this is like an anti-democracy through line that has to be crushed. It has to be broken and snapped and ground into dust.
Well,
Country can't survive this.
I think that in a lot of ways, and we can disagree on this, your kind of stated objectives here and your strategies going forward are what's responsible for us having so little choice when it comes to our two parties. Like, I cannot divorce because like I said before, a little angrier, your strategies are nothing new. This is not new or revolutionary thinking. You accused me of not being the revolutionary thinker, but I think that means you think that you are, and voting for Biden is your strategy.
I don't think
And this
not
is not
leaping
new.
off the cliff is a new strategy.
the lesser of two evils argument has been made over and over and over again.
I'm engaged. This is the radical politics of don't shoot yourself in the head to avoid another problem. I think that a Trump presidency is a bullet to the head. I think that threatening anything which increases the likelihood of that to solve any other issue is as sensible as threatening a bullet to the brain to solve any other issue.
There's a chain of events here that happened that led exactly to this. I went back and I rewatched our first conversation together. And one of the things that stuck out to me was I laid out for you in that first conversation. I said, here's what I'm concerned with, Vaush. We vote Biden. We basically get a holdover of Trump era policy. Maybe a little sprinkle of good here and there, but mostly just a pause on Trump era policy. And then we get Trump again. And you scoffed super hard at me for that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
I said I
Trump
remember.
was done.
I did. I would never have said that Trump is just flat out done. I might have said that there's a high likelihood he wouldn't be as powerful the next time around. I still believe that. Also, 4 years of not shooting yourself in the head, that's great. I think you should continue to do that.
Not if you're a migrant.
You think migrants should shoot themselves in the head?
What? No.
No, why? No,
I meant that.
It's
I just
shooting.
meant that the comparison doesn't hold water if you're a migrant. I don't think.
Sure, it does. Trump was as bad or worse than Biden on this. There you go. Simple.
Trump, they're actually fundamentally the same on this.
They're not. The end
Trump
to the policy to separate children from families.
Re-implemented. I can't remember the Remain in Mexico policy was re-implemented.
Yeah, family separation wasn't there. Minor difference, big improvement.
There are still hundreds and hundreds of families separated.
Right, but Biden created a task force to reunite them and has for the vast majority. He's not magic. He can't like snap his fingers and reunite. He's not choosing to not reunite the missing families. That's on Trump. Again, like it's always like, oh, well, they're bad for this. They're bad for this. I know there are always things to improve, but I just like you don't seem to comprehend.
About, like,
there's a very
things here.
You don't seem
like,
to understand.
Like
well, no. You're advocating for making them worse is the thing. Like right now, no matter how much you pretend otherwise,
I'm personally think they should get better. I'm in
no
favor
matter
of better,
how much you close your eyes and put your fingers in your ears and go nah. The fact of the matter is, no one. There is not going to be some magical. There is not.
No. Is it better? Is it better yet?
It got better for a second.
Aren't you
country
older
better
than
yet?
You wouldn't know it.
Legit, yeah. Jesus, like God.
Jesus,
throwing your baby toys out of the pram to fix politics. Look, you don't seem to understand that the consequence of your policy, of your idea here is just
I don't set policy,
there would be
I'm not a
fewer.
politician.
I know you don't commit to anything because that would require a spine. But
I'm pretty sure I have committed to several things.
If you don't, the only thing you've committed to is a lack of understanding of the differences between Republicans and Democrats. Your commitment here is to ignorance. In this specific scenario, right now, things are more heated than they have been in the past, but the underlying tendency remains the same. You vote for the best possible candidate. If you want to change things, you have to change the systems. Changing systems is hard and takes time. The best way to do that is to leech existing power and institutions and soapboxes. We do that through the Dems. We see good outcomes. We have seen good outcomes. The math is on my side. The science on my side. History on my side. On your side, a childish indignation and unwillingness to participate, and a flagrant disregard for the threat fascists pose to this country. Very leftist of you.
Non-participation. So.
Very leftist of you.
And neither one of us is advocating that. Here's that old crazy straw man again.
Yeah, you might want to wait till we're not on here.
We'll let the historians
decide. Yeah. This is definitely shit that I would reserve for the shit talk post show, where we're not here to like call you on it over and over.
Like that's not what we said.
By the way, I would like to add to further the discussion. You're just a big old baby, Vaush, and I find it hard to explain to your monosyllabic child's mind the very idea of resisting your oppressors when the world is burning. I find it impossible to elucidate to your tiny little toddler of a mind what the broad scope and the based revolutionary nature of my position, Vaush.
Do you appreciate how I didn't talk over you, so you could really focus on syllable?
Feel, bitch? How do you like that? I'm not a child. There's no children present. Okay, thank goodness. There's no children present.
Why would you call me monosyllabic, but then make fun of me for using vocab words? Shouldn't you have said polysyllabic?
Monosyllabic is the word that I used, and it means that you only use one sill because you dumb. That's what it means.
Is that what I'm known for? But then you said Amelia. All right, whatever.
Yeah, I'm also,
whatever,
I'm also
whatever,
not known for,
whatever
I'm also not known for
bit
being
you want to go for.
I'm also not known for being a uninformed child, despite what some of the people in your chat and community might parrot.
Well, you shurikens the otherwise tonight. Look, I don't know. I just
Okay.
don't want fascism to win. For this I am castigated. I am like Christ on the cross. They nail me to the cross because I believe that the fascists should not win the presidential election. In my corner, agreeing with me is everyone who does advocacy work for everything meaningful that gives us joy and light in our lives. And on your side, I guess there's, I don't know, habitual pot smokers. I feel like we've made the arguments. I feel like we've made our cases. We can leave it to time, history, and in my case, the unerring laws of mathematics to determine who is correct.
Got it. All right. Yeah, all right. Fair enough. Yeah. Well, you know what? One more thing before you leave, Vaush. One quick thing. It won't turn into a big thing. I just wanted to say from my heart, good day, sir.
Thanks for having me on, Lance. I hope you do well.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it coming on.
Take care.
Appreciate you. Have a good day.
Well, that happened. Well, I tried. I feel like I could have been a little less mean at some points there, but also I really didn't want to. That's how. That wasn't planned to be a voting debate, was it? I kind of figured it would be. Yeah, I really do feel like it's emotional. I feel like there's like nothing I can say. There's like it feels like I'm taking crazy pills sometimes because like it legitimately seems like. So first of all, like the first mistake they always have to make, and by they I mean like people who are like this, I guess, is they always have to downplay the threat Republicans face. This is like big, like weird South Park centrist energy to me, where it's like, well, both sides are bad. Like if you don't understand the difference, and he tried to equivocate, and by he I mean Paul's ego, because Paul's ego was the one I was arguing with like most of the time there. Paul's ego tried to like equivocate the threats between Dems and Republicans so many times, and he was wrong on like every one. The point where he paused, because the point where I said like it's usually Republicans who are lowering like minimum work age laws, and he's like, and look how things have gone under Democrats, not realizing that it was a state thing, and that under Democrats that doesn't tend to happen like that. Like, yes, you know, and then he got silent for a bit. I think that he just emotionally, like first principles or whatever, has to believe that both sides are fundamentally the same, because he grew up hearing that they were different, and he's sick of it because he keeps hearing over and over, hey, why is the world not getting better? Even though I keep hearing, the one side's so much better than the others. Why hasn't politics ended? Why hasn't good prevailed? And it's just like, it's a child's understanding of politics, fundamentally. No one prevails in politics, not in the long run, certainly. You just fight and fight and fight. And if you fight good, things are a bit better, and sometimes a lot better if you're really lucky, you know? And if you lose, things can get a little worse, and sometimes a lot worse. And you keep doing that until you die. And that's life, and that's joyous. That's a joyous celebration, okay? That's a wonderful thing, all right? Life is lived for conflict, but not against your fellow man. Instead, against inequality and injustice. And that's the burden we're all born with, the burden of knowing we could make a difference if only we tried. And that is what we have to do, and that is how it works. And there are no cheap solutions or easy answers. It's always like that. And that's good. It's not fair, but it's good. So that's one with the Republicans. And for two, I don't like when I talk to people like this, they never acknowledge that their solution makes no sense at all. Because they literally, the argument is like, what if 100 million people just broke off from the Democrats and voted for this hitherto unknown extra party? You know, like what do you that is never what are you talking about? You know, Emily did very well holding them Trump's fascism. Nothing in Bush's rhetoric or political goals came close to. Yeah, this is the thing. Fascism is usually like a negative extrapolation of the worst elements that were already present within a liberal democracy. Like Weimar Germany was already anti-Semitic. It was already reactionary. There was already a strong nationalistic sentiment from people who felt embittered by the results of the First World War. The United States already has a massive prison industrial complex, already has a massive and well-developed military industrial complex. We have our own issues. They're real. We have racism here. We have all these issues, okay? And fascism takes these things and uses them as wedges and like crucial issues to elevate their like hyper-nationalistic, you know, palingenetic bullshit, you know, their authoritarianism. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so like pointing out, like this would be like arguing that Hitler's really bad. It'd be like being in like 1932 and me pointing at Hitler and saying, hey, that's really bad. And Paul's ego is like, you know, under the Weimar Republic, there's still anti-Semitism. Like, oh, reminds me of the anti-Semitism in the Weimar Republic, which is happening right now. It's like, it's so brain dead. The complete destruction of any nuance or meaning. It's very frustrating for me because I feel like everything that I said there was correct, but sometimes it's grappling with the fundamental unfairness that being right doesn't necessarily change minds. I'm legit impressed by how calm and eloquent you were while he screamed and so raged. I feel like I got in some really, really good digs there. I'm pretty happy. It's like, in terms of rhetoric, I'm like checking myself off and like, okay, what do we do? And like, it's like, okay, I made my arguments. I got some good zingers in though. Like, you know, that's what we're here for, boys. That's all you can do sometimes. I do think it's kind of funny, like the idea of me being castigated for being a privileged Beverly Hills white soy boy or whatever, when the positions that I hold are very closely in line with advocates, activists, and union workers, where it's like, hey, go talk to workers. I'm like, yeah, you talk to workers, dude. You talk, go up to like a Starbucks union protest, ask them how they feel about labor rights under Biden versus Trump's presidency, you know? Just saying he needs to manage his finances better might make you look bad though. Did you like really mean that or just a joke? Well, it was two. For one, it was a joke because it sounded like a mean thing to say. So that was fun. But on the other hand, in the hypothetical that was being drawn there, I was saying, he was basically saying, I keep breathing air over and over and it doesn't like take me out of debt. Basically, I'm saying like it's pretty stupid of you to blame the downfall of the economy on Democrats winning over Republicans because those aren't necessarily related. And then he's like, oh, well, it's not. And then by saying you need to manage your finance better, what I'm essentially saying is you need to fix the problem where it actually stands. But obviously the main point there was to be a dick. So, you know, it's fucking. His argument seems so suicidal. Why would you choose to live when you'll die anywhere? It's this is basically like the this is like the end game scenario of like what I recognized in the Chapo Trap House podcast, where it felt like they were more interested in demonstrating intellectual superiority and smugness over normies by being like too cool to get angry about Trump, you know? Like put sunglasses on, like I guess it was mostly after 2020 and Bernie lost the second primary that things got really, really bad. After that point, it felt like they would, like every opportunity they got, it would just be them demonstrating that they didn't give a and I don't respect that at all. I don't respect that. I am more likely to respect like a Trumper who authentically has bad opinions than a person who has arrived at this smarmy South Park ass attitude. Amazing accusation of you doing nothing between primaries. Meanwhile, they do nothing and you help build a canvassing group. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I tend to stay pretty distant from stuff like this, but at the same time, it does really frustrate me when people pretend that all I advocate for is like voting blue, when that is like, oh my God, the only reason this even comes up is because people want to argue with me and have their own hot take about how if we all voted for Cornel West, we could usher in a utopian socialist state or something. But like 99.999 whatever % of what I do is mostly like trying to empower the people who listen to my stuff to make better political decisions themselves and to push for good issues. The canvassing org with Progressive Victory, I was trying to build inroads in DC just a month ago, like going over there, meeting with DC staffers, like having a good time over there, getting drunk, very important. Like the connections I've made, the money that's been raised, the donations, the charities, the fundraisers, like I clearly care about politics holistically. People, I mean, you could argue that I'm lazy, and I am. I don't deny that. I do tend to be pretty work shit, but I think that when I put the effort in, I demonstrate an actual, sincere, authentic interest in producing good outcomes as I describe them. You know, with my political biases being what they are, I think good things are good. So it does bother me a little bit when people accuse me of just being like a sort of rally boy for Biden. I agree that there is a meaningful difference between TJ and Paul. I disagree with TJ on a lot, but that was obviously like the vast majority of the disagreements there was with Paul's ego. Would you say it was a good debate? I think I did a good job making my arguments. I mean, there's always more that I could have done, I guess, but like past a point, it feels like arguments are less important than the zingers. But he brought up canvassing for Kerry and Gore's evidence that things don't get better with Dems, even though they both lost. Dude, I didn't even jump on that because the idea that things would have ended up the same if Gore had been president in 2001 is insane. Do you have any? That's like the canon event. Do you have any idea how different the world would be if Gore had won that election? Do you have any idea? We wouldn't be in Iraq or Afghanistan. We would have responded to 9/11 differently. The Patriot Act probably would. Everything. It's like he's like, yeah, I learned my lesson about caring about electoral politics when super mega double Hitler did 20 holocausts after my guy lost. It's like, if the good people are going to lose anyway by a tiny margin in a single state where the governor is the brother of the other guy, and also there was the butterfly ballots and the Supreme Court didn't allow for a recount because it would have like, do you think 9/11 would have happened if Gore had won? Very likely, yes, but very slight possibility, no. The Bush administration had some limited knowledge that something was afoot, but the intel agencies did not give very much info because they were competing with each other, and they also were kind of like dick waving and didn't want to give half complete information because they didn't want to be shown up by each other. I mean, like the CIA, the NSA. So it's possible that Gore might have been more like proactive on the bits of knowledge that he was given, or that the security agencies would have privileged him with more information, but I doubt that. In all likelihood, 9/11 would have happened. I do not think he would have invaded Afghanistan, but he might have. I know he wouldn't have invaded Iraq afterwards. No shot. No way. He never directly answered any of your questions. Basically, everything that I said was responded to by him with like, did you know that the Democrats are also bad? Which, like, come on. I know. Couldn't Congress have overruled Gore and voted for war considering the circumstances at the time? Maybe for Afghanistan. I just don't think under Gore, Iraq would have happened. Afghanistan was like, and it kind of went out there. Iraq was like a big controversy. The Bush administration spent months lying and manufacturing evidence, lying to the United Nations, lying to the American people, misrepresenting like intel report. Like Afghanistan was like, we hit the ground running in there. Iraq was like, they had to build an argument, and it was a very bad argument, and they went for it anyway. Is TJ spineless? Man, I've had good engagement with TJ in the past, but I do feel like, yeah, this feels pretty spineless to me. Vaush's responses reminded me when I was 13 and first experienced my political awakening. Yeah, me too. Yeah, I remember. The strain of fake cynicism and contrarianism present in arguments like this remind me of how I was when I was young. This was the time period during which I was a libertarian. Now, at the time, I was 15, I didn't know what libertarianism was really. All I knew was that the big government lied to you. They did Iraq, 9/11, libertarians seeking the truth. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about Ron Paul, reactionary politics. Like I had a vague emotional attachment to the aesthetic of being different and being like a challenger to the mainstream political hegemony. And as a consequence of that, my political arguments at that time were really, really bad. I don't think I've ever told this on stream before, but I actually had an argument with my father over this once. My dad, of course, has always been like a progressive lib. You know, Blue Dog Dems aren't a thing anymore, and they tend to be reactionary. But I guess, you know, he's always been like a big advocate for workers' rights and stuff. And there was this unironic, it was like a blog that I stumbled upon. This was back in the days when the internet was a lot more split up than it is today. there was a blog from some guy in, I don't know, I think he was in the Midwest. He wore a fedora in his pictures. Again, it was a different time. Um, and he was an anarcho-capitalist. And for a while, I thought this dude was like the smartest guy in the world because he approached every topic. He wrote very smart. Like the way he wrote was smart guy writing. You know exactly what I mean. Um, and additionally, he would approach everything with this very detached, very cynical, like they don't want you to know the answers to these questions kind of thing. And I read a couple of these about like welfare and stuff, and like I was thinking in my head, like, you know, like, oh yeah, I guess welfare does kind of incentivize poverty because you get reliant on the government. Blah. Like these are like very easy answers to sell to young dipshits who don't know how things work yet and are just looking to like be smarter, you know? Anyway, things eventually came to a head because he, unsurprisingly for an anarcho-capitalist, had an argument about racial science, which was essentially about like black culture versus black brains, why crime rate, blah blah, or something to that effect. And I read it, and at the time, I think I was young enough that I didn't really get it. I don't think I realized that it was racist. I thought it was just weird science that I didn't get. Kind of like if I read an article about like how different shades of skin are better at blocking light. I would read all this stuff and like people of like Jamaican descent are better in the sunlight because they don't burn like you do, white boy. And I would go like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. And I sort of approached it from that perspective. And I was watching this or reading this, sorry, on the family computer because again I was like 15, like, and it was 15 years ago. Yeah, like 2008. No, yeah, yeah, like 2008, 2009, something like that. Anyway, and my dad walked by, and he saw what I was looking at. He was like, "Hey, what's that?" And I talked with him for a bit, and it ended up escalating into an argument where he uh, basically tore into me, very deservedly so. I would have had better arguments, of course, being the debate lord that I am, but essentially, sort of like fundamentally uncompassionate behavior on my part, which stemming from, you know, the sort of like trying to feel smarter than others, which he was totally right to do. I'm not like embittered by this in any way, shape, or form. The only reason I'm saying this is because when I have arguments like this is what it reminds me of. I'm reminded of what I was like then, where I wasn't really thinking things through, but it was very emotionally important to me that I have a viewpoint that was that was out there and was challenging and stuff like that. Sorry, I rambled there for a little while. This is one of the reasons why young men are so vulnerable to that type of rhetoric. Yeah, thank you, my dad, for diverting me from the dark Vaush timeline, or the very white Vaush timeline, one might say. Having those viewpoints also means you're not accountable to anything that's going on. That's true, and that's why I mentioned spinelessness. Because to participate in the process is to accept some degree of responsibility for what's going on, even if it's a minimal degree of responsibility. Whereas doing this whole like everyone's shit, you know, throwing your arms up, whatever, gives you kind of like a rhetorical out. You know, it allows you to sort of you know, go, well, I didn't vote for the guy, which is, yeah, he can blame you for Biden, but refuses to take blame if Trump wins. Yeah, essentially. I QTP. I think I tried to. I just don't think. Is it all cynicism and delusional, or is it a big picture misunderstanding? I think it's delusional. The problem that I get is that whenever I have these conversations, I never get the answers to my questions. They always delusionally downplay the threat Republicans face because they have to, because otherwise they would understand what they're advocating for is suicide. They always equivocate between the two parties, even when it doesn't make any sense to. They always pretend that there's some kind of magical switch you could flip to just suddenly move. Like they'll basically argue, no, Republicans aren't going to win. What if just like every Democrat just voted for someone else somehow? Ridiculous, insane. But like that's the level of their answers are on. I don't think it's just a big picture thing, you know. I think is this just accelerationism? No, because accelerationists are honest enough to admit that they're trying to bring about a bad outcome in order to change the material circumstances. A lot of people who call themselves accelerationists are just reactionaries. They don't call themselves accelerationists, I don't think. They're inadvertently doing it. I don't think they're like covert Republicans or whatever. Well, no, you can be cynical, but cynicism isn't the same as being politically savvy. In fact, in many cases, they're kind of opposite. There's a reason why, if you want to know how politics works on like a institutional level, like a systemic level, If you want to read, I recommend going for Marx. If you want to talk to a human being, you talk to a liberal. You talk to like a liberal staffer. Those people know way the more than your average Twitter leftist or college radical or whatever else. And that's not because their opinions might be great. It's just because they tend to have a respect for the institution and the systems. The ideal leftist is somebody who can balance revolutionary theory and revolutionary perspective with that like grounded systemic analysis, which of course Marx did. He did. That's why he's cool. Can you talk more about him wanting Biden to use the FBI to blackmail senators? Yeah, this is what I mean. Ooh, man, it wasn't it TJ who said that? I didn't want to turn to TJ, but like, dude, fuck. Like, I agree that Biden and the Dems generally should, like, behind the scenes, try to pressure people into voting a given way. They do that, by the way. That happens when they all banded together to oust McCarthy, not McConnell, McCarthy, thank you. When they oust McCarthy, that's because they were doing, like, rigorous behind-the-scenes work to try to convince everyone what a piece of shit McCarthy was and why nobody should, like, for the sake of, like, civility, keep him on board. But the insinuation that, like, Biden should use his intelligence agencies to open up investigations and personally threaten and harass a senator for disagreeing with him. Dude, do you know what that would do? Like, first of all, I don't know if this would work, for one, because any kind of evidence they brought against him would turn into a protracted, multi-years long trial where Joe Manchin would have like the best lawyers in the world defending him in his coal mining, whatever. He might not have even committed any major crimes. That's possible. You can be a crook just by following the law. You know, that's why laws are what they are. The crooks made them for themselves, right? That's one. For two, like, he would probably get a massive popularity boost with Republicans if it was publicly known that Biden was going after him when he's already like the most right-leaning senator who's with the Dems. So that would probably, what's the term? That would probably negatively polarize him into being more Republican-leaning, right? Because Democrats already don't really like him, you know, and Republicans would love him if he ended up being the face of like a giant presidential scandal like that. And even if it does work, like, that's one vote, maybe. Okay, hope this never gets out for the entire remaining life of the president and Joe Manchin. And if it might not even work. Like, yeah, unironically advocating for using the intelligence apparatus to blackmail your political opponents. Yeah, does anyone else feel like if Biden did do that, they wouldn't like it? Like, I mean, TJ Kirk specifically, like, he said he should have done that, but I feel like if Biden had done that, that would have been like, oh, Donald Trump tried to use his FBI director to go after political opponents. Well, so did Joe Biden. You know what I mean? Manchin isn't running again, by the way. Yeah, I know.